Are we good? Are we good? All right. 5:04 p.m. Let's begin Town Council Committee meeting Monday, August 28th. Roll call shows that all councilors are present. We're joined by Matthew Powers, our newest councilor. Welcome. Thank you. And sort of soft opening for Matt because we're coming into council committees meeting rather than a full council meeting tonight. We do have a really full agenda. We haven't met for a while. So my hope is that we can handle items 1, 2, and 3 within the first 45 minutes to an hour, giving sufficient time to item 4 and manager's report and public comment at the end. So that's not a hard and fast. There's no cutoff there, but if we could all sort of work towards that schedule, I think that'll be hopefully a good way to structure the meeting. We're going to begin with Leo with Finance and Operations Committee.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I guess maybe I will start. I had requested, the main thing I want to do is make sure that we're looking at our financial statements on a monthly basis. And Sophie included some addition.
I think we can go.
Sophie included some additional documents as well, the unaudited fiscal year 23. I don't have any questions on that necessarily. I think that's going to be covered in detail once we have the audit, right? So appreciate including that. The monthly statement, again, I really just want us looking monthly to see the main things are percent spent, and we want to be aware of anything that's running astray. And the other one was the budget adjustments. We approve those in our orders, but I've asked that once we do any of that, just to see it in this format, because it's hard for me anyway. So I suspect maybe it is for others to sort of see where we're going without this summary document. So that was the main thing. And I inadvertently or accidentally asked Sophie to share the details of the adjustments, which she actually already did in the July 10th meeting, which I found after I asked her for that. So I don't think there are any major questions. I'm going to try and ask one question, and if it's convoluted, we can take it offline. Okay. So what threw me off was when last we approved 500 and whatever to 510 from the capital reserve budget in July, and it's all documented what these are for. So I think I've boiled it down to a question that's askable that will make sense. We'll see. But we approved $130,000 per Beach Street from the capital reserve. Yep. We also, we approved, not we, but the council approved $135,000 for Beach Street in 2022. Mm-hmm. Is it safe to assume that I assume the work hasn't been done. So did we have that left over on 2022? It went into the reserve and we're just taking it out.
Yes. Okay. You didn't have to ask a question. That was like a
that's
statement.
What I wanted to, that's what has been throwing me off, those sorts of things, this year to year stuff that is so hard to trace.
The problem that we run into, and it's relatively new for Rob, in terms of within the last 8 years or so, it used to be that the budget, once the 5-year capital plan was adopted, it was pretty well set and council didn't need to move it around much. So we would start to design projects and get them ready to be bid ahead of time so that when we appropriated the money, it was about, it's been bid, it's ready to go, we can make it work. When we started to really have to move the capital budget around more and the capital budget becomes more of a discussion year to year to year, we really can't bid work that we don't know we have money appropriated for. Because of the lead time to get projects scoped and designed, we have to appropriate the money ahead of time so that we know we have it to spend, which is why Beach Street was appropriated in a previous year. When we get to the end of the year, we don't spend it. And it used to be we carry it forward every year so it would show up in that same budget line. And then people were like, wait a minute, why are you carrying forward so much money? Are you overtaxing us? Which, if you didn't know the details, you could really think that. So that's why we now sweep those projects that have been appropriated but not yet built into the reserve, and then we pull them out when we're ready to build.
Gotcha.
And Beach Street is not quite ready to build. It's still in design. I think there's still some drainage work.
Very close. I had a couple questions to answer on that.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. I appreciate that. And that's the stuff that's been throwing me off and a few other things, but like adjusting the budget, that still throws me off. But again, I think seeing these monthly statements, seeing and being cognizant of where we're making those adjustments all the way through, for me at least, will be helpful, and hopefully everyone else will stay tuned in, be tuned in as well, and it'll be straightforward. So
there are just a couple of things I would say. There are some carry forwards that council has approved. They came in right before I left on vacation, and it takes multiple people to adjust the budget for checks and balances. So those haven't been done yet. When we do that, we'll update our list and give it to you. I did want to take just a minute, if we could, to talk about revenue and taxes. And if I am speaking things that you guys already know, please just let me know. But I think a lot of people think of revenue as the town just got paid $10, and therefore if it says that we're 96.1% collected as of today, how did we do that? Real estate taxes, we are responsible for accruing that, meaning that we recognize the revenue as soon as we commit the tax. And on the general ledger, we manage an accounts receivable that ties to the status lists of the almost 2,500 accounts that we have to show what is actually owed at any one time. So this will actually, for a moment in time, show 100% collected for real estate taxes and personal property tax. There are other taxes in this line, so it won't, that we have not yet collected for. But as soon as we start having to make adjustments for abatements or corrections, that will begin to change. You'll see that variance. So the other thing that we look at with taxes on that 10 line on the first page is it's not just real estate and personal property, it's also excise tax, boat tax. There are some other taxes that we collect. Just because excise tax has crept up to a $770,000 budget line, wanted to let you know that we're at 17.4% collected for 16.6% of the year. That's not exactly, that doesn't equal out to a steady collection each month. This would be a heavier month for us. So I think we're right on the line where we would expect to be for that. In the intergovernmental revenues, homestead exemption, as we get paid on the 20th of each month, then when I looked for the balance for August, we were at about $710,000 collected. So we're on target there. And then we have received a partial homestead. So the way the homestead reimbursement works, we get reimbursed about 76% of the cost to the town of the homestead reimbursement. They give us a portion. At first, they tried to tell us it was 80%, and then they just admitted that it's a portion. By November 1st, we are required to file all of our, it's the state valuation return. It's a big document that the assessor has to send into the state. That calculates exactly how many homesteads at the full 25,000, and then we have a bunch that are less than that because the home isn't valued at 25,000. So we got 360,000 of the 460,000 that we expect to get. So that is good. And we also received the payment because the rest of that money comes in next fiscal year. So we also got the payment for last fiscal year. I talked to finance today. We're going to bill out our pilot is a word that you'll hear. We don't have airplanes. It's about a payment in lieu of taxes. We get 2 pilots. One is from Freeman Forest, and that's for $17,600. And you'd ask me why I would know that off the top of my head. It hasn't changed since I've been here. And the other one is for the University of Maine, which is $655,431. Again, has not changed since the second year I was here. So
where is that? Sorry.
Huh?
Where is that?
Those are under the intergovernmental revenue is where the university's payment lives, and other revenue is where Freeman Forest will live.
And those are not adjustments, those are already in there, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And what did you say, does the 76%, because I noticed that on your on the commitment document, is that something that's dictated by our valuation and all that stuff, or is that statewide?
It's statute.
Okay.
And it will go up and it will go down. The other thing, we can talk about it during tax. The interest revenue on reserves, we do not ever budget for that because we simply allocate it to a reserve, or you reallocate it at year end. And the interest on tax increment financing funds, we don't budget for that because they go back into the individual program development fund. We don't have a choice about that. And they show up on the A3 that we'll talk about in a little bit.
So Sophie, those last two, you're looking at 8315 was the line you were looking at for interest on funds, or?
Yeah, so the interest on reserves is 8515. The interest on TIFs is 8315. But we won't ever adjust that because they just get rolled into general ledger balances.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I really hadn't studied the revenue and realized that we're at 96%. So that.
Yeah, I wish that
I looked at it. I was like, Sophie's going to explain that, I'm sure. So thank you.
Yep.
I had one other question on this, Leo. It just connects to Leo's question about the budget adjustments. I remember in July 10th that there was a list of the adjustments, and I think you said that that's ongoingly tracked somewhere in a document that we can refer back to.
Yep,
where is it? Just tell me.
Share it with you.
In the shared drive.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks.
And it might be just shared with you. I'll have to look because it lives in its own. It lives on the finance, so it's just shared so you can see it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on me. I just couldn't find it when I was looking today. So yeah.
And so that document that lists the adjustments with the specifics, we call that Leo's file. It's actually named Leo's file. No, that's a good thing. That as we actually do the adjustment will show up on that list. So by the end of the year, you'll be able to track that to the big file, to the budget.
So Leo's document.
So Leo's is a simplified version
of the one that's shared already.
Yes. So the one that's
yes. Okay.
Well, you got that. He's it's not shared with him. I print it after we update it.
But it was shared with me at some point because I have the same one from July.
Yeah, for the meeting.
Yeah.
So that is done by order. The bigger file with the multiple spreadsheets is done by budget line. So we can track it either way for you.
This one is probably what you're looking for because it says the order and the date and what's in it. So
okay. And we all have that in the shared.
So if it's shared with you, we need to go back and double check for Matt that he has access to it. That's okay. I'll I'll let you know.
Is there a subfolder in the shared drive that's just financial documents?
I haven't looked at there in a little bit. I think there was a bunch for budget, but I think what I was asked was for the spreadsheet that staff uses to track. And if it's on a timely basis, I just shared it, gave you the ability to look at it, but not touch it because Bob is really protective of his.
I'll email you if I can't find it. Oh, thanks, helpful.
So next.
Do you want to just quickly go through the expenses? Because there are a couple things that I have looked at for 24. If you look on the expense summary sheets, when you look at these reports out of Trio, which is our software system, our financial software system, if you look in the top left corner of the reports, when you see Orono and no number after it, that is the current year. If it's a prior year report, it will tell you the year that it is generated from. When I look at the general government line, in insurances, that looks like we've spent a lot of money on insurance. We don't pay a monthly bill. We pay 3 times a year on different cycles for workers' comp and property casualty. So that is why that number will go from very small to very big, and then you'll see another small hit to it. If I were you and I was looking at code enforcement, I would wonder, why have we spent 19%? That budget is so small that a $9,000 annual payment for their software makes it look like it's over kind of larger spend. The after school programming, of course, we have no expenditures for that. We're waiting to close out the pool for this year. But to remind you that, so we still have to get the bill from the university for the lifeguards, which can take a few months. But also that we experienced the pool from July and August, but a lot of the bills actually start coming in for the chemicals and things like that prior to the end of the last fiscal year. So you'll see that number increase. When we look at the capital infrastructure fund on page 2 of the report, which would be 7512, you notice $5,209.50. That's a prior authorization of a budget from Chapel Hill College Heights project and the Mahaney project. We wait until we close out the books from the prior year to pull those ongoing balances in the special projects forward. So if you remember, in June of last year, one of the orders that last year being 2023, one of the orders that you approved was to carry forward reserve and special project remaining budgets. We wait until we close the FY23 books to carry those forward. When we do that, you will see that as a budget adjustment, which will show up on all of the pages, and we'll review when that comes in. But we wait till we close the books to make sure that we've made all of the June 30 payments so that we don't end up running those into negative budget.
That's capital infrastructure.
Yep, the bond fund. You'd also see that in reserves, TIFs. There are a couple of other places where grants would be the other place you see a lot of red. The last thing on here is just to let you know that Zach, our finance manager, and our deputy fire chief, Kevin, have been working diligently to try to get our first pay request for the SAFER grant. It's about a $63,000 request. It's a little challenging. It's unlike any of the other FEMA fire grant requests. So we're on request number 2, but Washington and Tampa can communicate, which we did over vacation and just submitted our second try this week. So today.
So just to clarify, we have already secured the grant. We know the money's there. This is the process of accessing those.
Yeah. So the way that works is we actually have to make the payments to staff, and when we get to the end of a quarter, we can request reimbursement back. The first request is the most difficult because you're trying to align a budget forecast for 3 years into an expense for the first quarter, which does not necessarily align. So we've just got to talk with FEMA about why, for example, one firefighter who has family help is being paid more than another firefighter who doesn't. So it's not an issue with what we have expended. It's more an issue of how to make what we've expended fit with their sheets that are very different than the way they want us to report for all the other grants.
So question, Sophie, Brookfield Water Rescue Grant, 6,000.
Yep.
On the expense. Where is?
So that budget was actually accepted and approved in FY23. We haven't pulled any of those remaining budgets forward into 24 yet until we close the 23 expenditures. I don't have a way of putting those funds back into 23 if I pull them forward into 24.
So just paid it within this new year. It's from last year. It's from fiscal. So I would see that as a revenue on 23. Is that right? That
one you actually would see as a revenue on 23 because they gave us a check. But for a lot of these grants, you might not see the revenue there until we actually submit the reimbursement.
That's a budget adjustment 7,000. Thank you.
Okay.
Funny, it makes sense when you say it. Then when I'm back with pattern, what did she say?
Well, I would hope that I can explain it. I would hope.
Okay, so that's fiscal year to date financial reports, the tax collector and treasurer's report.
So I don't have a cash flow report for you yet. Staff is just, again, cycling back from vacation, but I will have one for you the next time we meet. The tax collector's report is, we just committed taxes, and I wanted to quickly go through the tax commitment sheet, which is in your background for you. The good news is that if you compare FY24 taxes to FY23 taxes, we actually gained about $17 million value. To give you a sense of where that value came from, part of it was shelter, but Dirigo Pines Inn increased by $3.4 million of value. The university has some exempt value increase that didn't show there. Sargent Realty, so that would be 3 Godfrey Drive, went up a little over $1 million of value. The new marijuana grow facility on Godfrey Drive, that was an increase of $976,000 of value. 9 Godfrey Drive was $738,000 of value. Dice Arts, that little, the improvement and the car wash is $500,000 of value. The two hotels on campus were close together, were close to those are close to $3 million of increased value. So then we add 10 houses, which were all new value. So we have increased on the real property side by almost 14 million, and then we picked up another 3 million in personal property. So, and that is an assessor who is just going through and cleaning up personal property and asking good questions.
Will that be the extent of the campus hotels, or will that go on once they're finished?
That is a lot of it right there. It's the majority of the value. There might be another slight shift in the value for the hotels. We took a loss in the downtown and transit oriented TIF district on Tyler, but that for this year, but we're going to get a really large increase there next year. So you're right about timing, because value is as of April 1st of each year. It's not when we commit taxes. By statute, the Constitution, it has to be April 1st of each year.
Given where those are, they don't look like, it seems like there's going to be a lot left to finish, and a lot of finishings and a lot of property, maybe personal property stuff. And
personal property, we don't have anything in for them. So there would be gain with personal property, but yes, furnishings, fixtures, but the lion's share of the structural change just come in.
Those are structured, they're not university properties, so they're not exempt.
Yeah, so what was really interesting is when the university began their planning process, they included the town leadership. At the time, it was Dave Milan and I went over and were part of the planning, and the point that we continuously made in our interview was we didn't want things that were going to compete, and we also needed them to not put things that would otherwise be taxable on campus and make them not taxable.
Sure.
Which is where they, I'm not saying they did it because we said that, sure, but we felt included, so I want to. But when they came to the part about deciding that they wanted to build more capacity to house overnight guests, they started looking at the public-private partnership. As soon as it became a public-private partnership, it became taxable. So, and the university was very clear in their process that was the intent, that it would remain that way. Okay. So those are not sheltered in any way, yeah, just new value.
Okay, great.
So when people ask about what Mitch does, $17 million has a lot to do with value has a lot to do with what Mitch does and his team. He would get mad if I didn't say and his team.
No, that was a very artfully done plug. So thank you. How much of the 17 million would you say is like new property, new construction, new investment, and how much of it would you say is, if there's nobody put on, just an assessment of what was already there that's updated and better reflects the market? So
there would be very few market changes here. There were some because Dirigo Pines we had looked at before the reval. They were one of our first places in, so they were kind of behind the slope on the reval. So we sent the assessor back to look at Dirigo Pines to make sure that they were getting an appropriate slice of the pie. But beyond that, we had talked about doing a market adjustment of 10 to 15% because our sales were coming in so much higher than our assessed value on residential properties. We were looking at doing market adjustment for the big three student housing complexes and their sales that might support that. But where the assessor finally kind of came in was we think the market might be cooling off because of the increase in the mortgage, the interest rates for mortgage. And we will be a year behind. So right now we're still at 97% of value. That's our internal calculation. At some point this fall, you'll get the state calculation, which might be different. But at that amount, our assessor felt like it made more sense to not make a market adjustment. Now, somebody appealed there. We had one individual, I don't even remember which one it is here, who wanted the assessor to come in because they felt like their property was overvalued. The assessor went in last year. We couldn't pick up the additional value that we found. So because you're not allowed to supplement a property that you've already assessed in a year. So that showed up this year. But that again is a handful, one or two. Almost all of these are based on we had 439 building permits. I want that to sink in for a minute. We have one code officer who managed 439 building permits last year. That's pretty remarkable. But that development adds value. At the same time, those developments add service needs. So it's a balance. And so when you can get it from things by growing things that you already have, it is a bit of a win, greater financial win for the town. Tyler Technology as an example when it comes in next year, or what Sargent is doing, where you're adding to an existing property that already used sewer and already had needs is a more cost-effective way to grow if we can.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
You are welcome.
Can you just explain BETE again?
Yep. That is Betty, or business equipment tax exemption. So there are the way the statute works. If you have personal property that is used for commercial purposes, so to earn money, it is taxable as personal property. However, the legislature has gone in and said there are certain types of personal property or industry that are important, and therefore the state exempts that value from taxation, and we get a portion of that lost revenue back from the state as a reimbursement. So it works a lot like homestead, only it's for personal property.
And is it about 50%, obviously?
It is. There's enhanced and there's regular. It depends, but yes, about 50% we get back.
So why do these all add up? Or does 5A not add? It doesn't add.
So when you use your taxable valuation to what you are calculating for taxes, to make it all work, you're using the 605 million.
Okay.
And then, but in order down below, again, now we're getting to inside baseball. It took me 2 years to figure out how the tax commitment sheet worked. Down below, when they do the calculation, you will see a minimum and a maximum rate based upon all the value in the town. The 605 times the mill rate gives us the dollars for tax commitment, which is in line 19.
So does the 605 holds out homestead exemption and holds out Betty? Is that right? And then it gets added in at 76% and 50% down.
Yeah, because that's the reimbursement that we get from the state. So that when, remember when we go through the budget and I say, council doesn't establish the homestead reimbursement or Betty or the overlay. It's all a function of the tax commitment. So when you go down through, you see that we had talked about overlay in the $50,000 range during the budget, which is what I kind of set it at. We ended up going up to 155 because of the additional value, the multiple accounts that went up, making sure that we have money if we have refunded abatements that we have to pay out.
Okay.
So when we have that much of a swing, remember we use overlay to pay out for tax abatements. That's where we pay for costs associated with tax abatements, processing them and refunding.
Calculated based on a rounding error or something? Is that
so? The initial one that's calculated as part of a round, it initially gets calculated as part of a rounding error, which is where I think it would have come in at 53,000. I'm searching my memory, but somewhere around there. However, when we look at a $17 million growth in value and the potential for tax abatements and reimbursements, we felt like it still gave the council the reduction in the mill rate that you were looking for, more than you were looking for, and left us with money to be able to fund that out without ending up going.
So it's used for paying for the abatements. It's calculated based on.
Yep. So if you look at it, our minimum tax rate could have been 23.15. Our maximum tax rate by statute could be 24.31, and we ended up at 23.40. So we try to stay on the lower side of what we are entitled, or what we are allowed, not entitled.
And the decision to increase the overlay was directly connected to 17 million in increased value.
Yep.
Concerns whether there would be more abatements as a result.
Yep.
Thank you. I was curious about the increase. So
yep.
Thank you.
So do we, this is for 20.
So this is where things get confusing, even to me. We bill our taxes as a function of how we operate on a fiscal year. So we bill them once in September and once in February to pay for fiscal year, this year 24. That's where all these numbers come from. The state looks at tax commitments as each individual discrete year based on the prior April 1st. So we're talking about April 1 of 2023. So on all of the state paperwork, this is referred to as the 2023 tax commitment. The way we use the money and the way our tax bills read, it is for the FY 24 year.
For a year behind.
Yep.
So on our summary now, does that get adjusted just instead of 53 or whatever we have there to 155 or?
Yep. So the next time we meet, you're going to see, because you've given me the authority to adjust the budget for tax commitment, you're going to see real estate, personal property, homestead exemption, Betty, revenues, use of TIF funds for credit enhancement agreements, because those were calculated as part of the new tax rate, are all going to be adjusted on the revenue side. And on the expense side, you're going to see us adjust the overlay, the credit enhancement agreements, and the TIF expense will be part of what we adjust.
So we'll see that in the form that we saw it before, just with an adjustment. Awesome. Great. Good stuff.
Yep. So, good. Thank you for the opportunity. We worked together on a message that's going out with the tax bill. Thank you for Sophie. That was, I think, it's very. I'm glad we had that opportunity. And where it says that that we decrease property taxes by 1.68%, is that does that extend to the actual bill, or is that the mill rate? And it could, you know what I mean? Or is it one and the same?
I'd have to go back to the actual verbiage that I put in there.
Yeah. It says growth in the town's taxable property valuation due to new commercial and residential construction improvements of approximately 17 million. Doesn't mention Mitch, but way to go, Mitch. Means that property taxes have been decreased by 1.68%.
Yeah, that is going to be the mill rate.
So when people ask me, is my bill going down? What do I say?
Depends on the valuation.
Go ask Leo. He'll tell you.
I mean, it depends on the valuation, right? If your valuation went up and the mill rate went down, it could still be a bump, but
it's static.
For most everybody in the town, they are going to see a decrease in their tax bill.
Okay.
Most everybody.
Okay.
But for people who did things,
right,
and those handful that had gotten a good deal when we initially implemented the reval, they will probably might see an increase. So we had, if I could just for 2 minutes go back to the property tax stabilization program that we've calculated cost the town somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 to implement when you looked at real cost and in-kind costs. We had 359 people apply and be accepted into that program. We had 24 stabilized accounts, which means 24 people added value to their homes and were capped at last year's tax. Everybody else went down. That program is now no longer in existence. So everybody who applied for the program and was accepted will get a letter. And I'm not promising when.
Right. Thank you.
Letting them know what their new options are. And the tax assessor is going to talk with them because the new options that are available are actually old options that are just funded with tweaks coming to make it easier for people to get it. One of those is the tax deferral program. And an individual would really want to have a conversation with the tax assessor to forecast out what that might mean to them. Mm-hmm. Because what we're seeing are people in other communities that are high users of that, where the deferred tax is so much that when the senior passes away and wants their family to live in the house, that deferral becomes payable immediately. And so they might not be able to continue to live in the house. And if you go to sell the house thinking that you're leaving something for your family, you can end up with zero value. And so it's not explained very well in the process. It makes it seem like this is a good way to not have to pay your taxes. But at the end of the day, there's a cost that has really come back to haunt some folks.
So I thought I had heard that they were just going to do means testing or something like that. I didn't realize the program went away because somebody mentioned that to me. I said, no, I don't think so. Yeah.
So what they did is they realized that they already had 2 programs at revenue sharing to help defray the cost without, like, we still get paid. We have one individual in town that uses a deferral program. And when the bill goes out, he sends it to the state and we get a check from the state for that payment. But you're still going to go through that same process. They're making it easier, meaning the means testing is coming up, which the means testing before was really low.
Well, and there was no means testing to this thing that they just passed.
No, none.
So they just completely have done away with this.
Yeah, so all of those efforts, we have a really nice current list of seniors, which we've used.
That's great. That is good.
But
that's very unfortunate that
it was a lot of work, and you know, Jessica and our assessor did a ton of work to make that happen. Just saying.
How much of an impact on people's, was it like thousands of dollars on people's tax bills, or was it
over time?
No, just over that 1 year.
Oh, the 1 year for us?
Well, no,
it's like $600.
So someone's gonna get a $600.
No, over 24 accounts.
Yeah.
$600.
When we're stabilized.
We're stabilized.
Okay.
And that's my memory.
Yeah. Okay.
But
and of the 300 and some odd who applied and got a lowered tax bill, they didn't get stabilized because we dropped the mill rate. Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm not criticizing dropping the mill rate at all. I'm just saying the math didn't work for them to get a benefit from that program.
So no one's going to pay more taxes. Am I hearing that no one, and apologize if I'm getting it wrong, but is no one going to pay more taxes this year because the program's going away, or will it be, what's going to be the impact on people's taxes?
So this year, the state is reimbursing the town for the money that we stabilized.
Okay.
Next year, that becomes a state program, and the town is supposed to get paid 100% of its tax bill. And then the property gets liened by the state to be collected upon the death of the senior.
Well, that's the deferral program.
That's the
deferral.
You're asking about it.
And then there's the circuit breaker program.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what they're doing in terms of the threshold, but that the citizen is still responsible for paying their tax bill. But when they do their income tax at the end of the year, if they qualify for the circuit breaker, it becomes part of the calculation as money back to you.
But you're asking about this program that the legislature just did for a year.
Yeah.
And the net effect was, it didn't affect 340 of these people or no, 353 of these people, because our taxes went down anyway. So it didn't hold it here because they dropped. So there's no effect. And then.
So what will happen for the 24 that were stabilized next year, they're gonna go up. And so they would have gone up this year. So if next year we increase the mill rate, because that's where you guys come in, that the mill rate goes up, they're gonna eat what they would have gone up this year plus what they would go up next year. If it goes down next year, it means maybe they'll go down or just have a small bump for where they were stabilized.
Did I hear right? Did you say it was only $600 and something for all 24?
I think I'm gonna look again, just because I have not seen the general ledger that hits into.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
It was not a lot. I will tell you that. Are we ready to go on to the A3? Yep. Okay. So I passed this out, the big piece of paper. And we call this the A3 because when you look at the audit, that is the name of this statement, is the A3. What you have in front of you is a portion of the A3. Tried to keep it, to simplify it as much as I could for you. The goal of this conversation is to talk about the assigned fund balance, which is your second group down on this piece of paper. So the first group is your restricted. And you can't change that because that's tax increment financing dollars that you're only allowed to spend, expense out. But the assigned fund balance, you can do whatever you want to that. What I wanted to talk about was there is $50,000 of accrued interest on reserves. And council has talked about various projects it might want to do. And now would be the time for you to assign the amount of fund balance that you would like to do with that. You are not capped at any specific number here, but I give you all of them to kind of take a look at. I think one of the things we're going to have a conversation about once we get more information regarding the Route 2 corridor study and some other of Rob's bigger projects, we want to talk about the long-term plan for the capital infrastructure account But I would also remind you that this is as of June 30, and we swept $510,000 out of this account on July 10th. So just kind of keep that in mind, that
Out
it's
of the
not
general fund?
no, out of the capital infrastructure account, which is at 1.3 million. Thank you.
And we put in.
Yep.
Just delta there.
Put in how much, Leo?
We put in 411,827.
Okay.
We've taken it, we approved, allocated out.
Oh, okay.
So the reason that this is here is at the council meeting, because we're getting ready to go through the audit, I need to have council's approved assignment of fund balance. So I have heard that people are interested perhaps in doing something with marketing. I've heard some other kind of special projects. And I just want to make sure that whatever that I capture on that order, whatever it is you're looking to assign.
So are you asking for councilors to give you individual feedback that then we vet as a council, or are you asking for us to have a discussion right now?
So I, in the past, would simply present this at council. There has been some discussion that has been a councilor or two have already seen me about things that they might want to do in the coming year. This would be the time that if we wanted to put that on this for discussion at the council meeting to agree to an assignment of fund balance, now would be the time to kind of throw that out there as to.
We just talking about the interest?
No, you can assign whatever you want, Leo. You could choose to let the interest lapse and leave all the assignments as they are. You could choose to add, you could choose to subtract. I guess the point is just, I don't want to surprise you on Monday night with, hey, it's time to do assigned fund balance.
And when you say on Monday night, which specific Monday night is the last Monday night that it has to be in
September 11th. It is something that has to come through a formal council vote.
So I would say that if you have not yet spoken with Sophie about it and it's something that's on your mind, either send me a note, send Sophie a note.
Just so I'm understanding the assignment.
Yeah.
We're looking at all of these reserve accounts.
Yep, these are established reserve accounts.
And their fund balance and the balances.
Yep.
And making suggestions on if we want to do anything additional with them. What does happen to the interest?
So the interest is whatever you guys want to do. What the previous council decided several years ago was that tracking this and doing the monthly reconciliation for interest to individual accounts was more work than it was worth. So understand, council controls all of fund balance. You can assign or not assign any portion of that you want. This isn't a one and done situation. You could come back mid-year, end of next year. So it's not a matter if you wanted to say, gee, we have trying to look at another $84,000 in a solid waste reserve. Let's talk about that. We could still talk about that as we talk about solid waste and make decisions that we could impact mid-year that would show up at the end of next year. In general, these tend to kind of roll for a few years. Then we look at our priorities and say, here's something new I want to try, or we're not doing this anymore. Maybe we should let it lapse. Or Rob might say to you, you know, we've got 1.3 million, we've got 600,000 of unencumbered capital reserve. When I look ahead, I'm probably not going to need all of that because we're going to do something else over here. So I would either I would unassign 100,000 of that, or maybe I'd put it into capital equipment reserve, or maybe I'd put it, as we talk about trying to establish building reserves and things like that, you might want to adjust those numbers. The reason that I'm bringing this as a more fluid thing is just I've had two separate counselors talk to me about a couple of projects that they're interested in funding. This would be kind of the last time that we could easily pick it up for this fiscal year, would be to assign money for it. Otherwise, it becomes a direct assignment from fund balance in the middle of the year, which is a little more, we don't normally do that. It can be done, but we don't normally do it for non-emergencies. So this is me trying to be responsive to what I'm hearing individually from counselors.
Much appreciated.
Go ahead.
I see that there's money in an Orono Basin TIF, and wanted to make sure that sort of the neighborhood in the Orono Basin that just had a meeting to talk about parks and stuff, if there's opportunity for some of that to be available for community initiatives, I'd be interested in exploring that opportunity.
So when we talk about the TIFs, which is that first section, there we can explore just about any opportunity. I would suggest that they start at the staff level, simply because it takes a little bit of research to determine whether the state approved program development funds. And sometimes it's not a yes or a no. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's more, well, if we structured it this way instead of the way you're suggesting it, it would make it an easier argument to do something.
Great, that's helpful. Next one, the Sally Jacobs sculpture steward. I'm curious what that line is that sort of just left over from an old project?
So those are donated funds. Okay. And there is a process council could go through, but those were donated for work that had to, when they raised money for the Sally Jacobs sculpture, I think it was the Land Trust did a bunch of fundraising for that. And they, when they were done, they had this $1,904 left over. They gave it to the town in case we needed it for maintenance. The issue that the town runs into is when people donate money to the town for a specific purpose, we have to use it for that purpose. There is a process that we could go through in a couple of years. I think we'd probably want to wait a decade where we haven't expended any funds. Council could then go through a process. I would have to do a little research. I've never actually done it. I am aware that it exists to change from for council to reallocate donated funds.
That makes sense to keep it allocated for donor intent at this time for $1,900. That doesn't seem like the place worth snagging money. That's all I got.
So just a clarification then on the assigned funds, like some of them have come from donations that people specifically intended for certain causes. Others are simply decisions that the council made to create a reserve fund.
Yep.
So although we, I guess you're saying technically can move things out of any of these funds, there are some where it really would be more at our discretion, and others where really there was an intention of people who donated and we're not likely to want to touch those. Are there others like that other than the Sally Jacobs one for us to be aware?
The Sally Jacobs one, and I think Recreation Reserve would be a hard one to untangle because some of that is donated funds and some of it is scholarship money that has swept from the operating fund. But again, if you called it all donated, there's a process we could go through. And the skate park would be another one that is donated. I think when we look at ones like the police tuition reimbursement of $15,000, there's a contractual obligation behind that. The council said, let's just raise up to that amount of money. They built it up over time and it stays there. But technically, although you have the obligation, you could appropriate the money every year if you wanted to, but.
That's helpful. I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting we move anything. I just wanted to understand which ones have
Yeah.
this. Yes.
I mean, I think there's purpose behind all of them.
Yeah.
But, and we could talk about it if you wanted to take time, at another venue. I guess I was more interested in if we wanted to add 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever thousand to this, it would be easier to add it now and then even talk about how to allocate it as we go through the year. It's just easier to pick it up in the audit.
So so you're asking us to, in terms of like what we could do to be helpful to you, and it's going to be at a meeting at our September council meeting. So we're going to get it, and we're going to discuss it, and we're going to change it as we sit up there at the table, right?
You can,
yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
And then, but when could we? I'm sure I'm one of those counselors who's fit into you with that, more ideas than you need sometimes. What can we do to be helpful to you in terms of a deadline? Can you give us a time so we can support this?
Next week, we have several vacation days away in the town manager's office. So I am going to have the bulk of the agenda ready by the 5th. So it would be helpful if I could have it maybe by Friday, the 1st of September, what your ideas are, and then I can get them
this week.
This Friday.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of September when it's still August.
And so just to be clear, the amount that you're looking at is the 50,000 or beyond that amount?
Whatever. It can be whatever. I mean, it can truly, you're assigning
3.579689 million. Stop
wow.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these are all accounts, correct? That have money in them?
So
Currently?
it's
You said
one cash,
partial.
it's one cash account that is sub-accounted on the general ledger.
I know. I'm asking. There's no more.
These are all your assigned.
Everything.
Yep.
Side.
The other ones are different types of accounts, like perpetual care and construction and grant funds and stuff that are not assignable.
See. Okay. Do you have anything that whole instance you'd be coming and saying, I think we need to do, it would be a good idea to do X, or do you have those kinds of thoughts?
Yep, I think it might be a good idea for you to allocate some money around staffing and staff development.
Sense for what that.
If it's a simple assignment of fund balance, which means it's not a permission to expend, I might assign $75,000 to $100,000, depending on.
And that would mean taking from somewhere.
It is, you take all of your fund balance and you're assigning a piece. So if you want to look at it in a very linear kind of way, the best way to look at it, Leo, is probably to say, let's take it from unassigned fund balance. Because if you don't assign it, it would live in the unassigned fund balance, which is determined so we're in a cycle where you tell the auditor what you want to assign, which then becomes the assigned fund balance, which then calculates what the unassigned fund balance is.
Yeah.
But it's not permission to expend. If it's in the reserve accounts, in order to expend the funds, council has to have a vote and decide to expend those funds.
Unassigned fund balance, which is going to be generated from what we didn't spend last year.
Yeah, I think it is over collections and under expense. And at one point, I think I gave you a number of about $400,000 that I was comfortable at that point. To give you a sense, if you go back to your audit from last year, we were at a total general fund balance of $10,084,145. 4.2 million of that was unassigned. And I don't want people to think that we're rich, because that's not rich, but it does give you the opportunity to kind of think ahead to, are there some things you might want to have in place? And I think a little bit, this allows you some contingency without expending the money and without taxing people for it, but rather to think about, we've got a whole year ahead of us. Are there things that you're thinking about? It's just a lot easier to take them out of a assigned fund balance than direct hit to unassigned fund.
I'm just curious, since I'm brand new.
Yeah.
Just on one of these in particular, which will help me understand all of them.
Sure.
So I'm looking because at the library maintenance reserve.
Yeah.
And my question would be, what was the purpose of, I mean, I can understand why I want to have a reserve for it, but does this include like books and stuff, or is this just like the bathroom exploded and we need to redo the bathroom, or is this like mowing the lawn? What is that for?
Nope, these are the library maintenance reserve and the public works facility maintenance reserve. Those are two of the newer buildings that the town has built.
Yeah.
And when we built those buildings, the council at the time said, we need to set money aside to be able to ensure that we are putting roofs on and taking care of the blocks on the siding, taking care of the maintenance of the building, the heating structure, the general depreciation. It would also cover if the bathroom exploded. I'm sure Rob would come to me and say he needs some of that $50,000 for that.
And so how long has this particular fund been accruing? I mean,
12 years. 12 years.
And some going out.
Yep, so it's $5,000 a year. And for a few of those years we did interest, we accrued interest in it. We have not expended a lot from that fund. Some. We had
and all of these are similar to that in terms of there's a small amount and it's just accruing. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so as I understand, people will give me their ideas by Friday, and depending upon what I get will determine what Jeff and I craft for an order. But we will get an assigned something for you to approve for the meeting on September 11th. And Matt, if you have more questions, just let me know.
Yep.
Staffing update. So we have 2 positions vacant in the police department. We just brought on Officer Clement, who I'm excited to say is a bluepin, so he's fully trained. I did have to cut a check to the city of Auburn based on the statutory requirement for us to reimburse them for his training expense. He had just graduated from the academy. So he, that is a charge of about $40,000, $46,000. So you're gonna see that on your next council agenda to confirm that expense. So we have 1 conditional offer out that we're waiting for, and a vacancy with no takers at this point in the police department. One of the things we are struggling with in the police department is we have bodies, but we still have to get people through the academy and trained for the road. Our detective did get his provisional waiver, so he looks like we'll be able to get a waiver since his certification came from the state of Florida. So that's good news there. We have 1 vacancy in the fire department and are still kind of going through that process. We welcomed a new person down front. Sharina is our new person down front. Rob has a public works worker 2, which is required to have a commercial driver's license. And we're kind of waiting through that process.
Has a person or has an opening?
Has an opening, I'm sorry. And we received notice while I was on vacation that our town planner has accepted a job in Southern Maine. So I am concerned about simply putting an ad out. I have made plans to cover the September planning board meeting with the town attorney, the local town attorney, to make sure that the planning board maintains their the support that they need. Great board, very, very active, and Phil does a great job managing the process, but Kyle spends a lot of time giving them legal advice as they go through the process. So not as an attorney, just through his understanding of the regulatory process. So knowing that people around us have a really hard time picking up planners in Northern Maine, it is just not caught on the way it has in Southern Maine. And knowing that the things that are on Kyle's plate are highly technical, that we really needed his capability, you know, the experience and the ability to do. We reached out, received a few references from different places around contract planners. It was interesting, they all gave us the same name as being one of the best. So Mitch and I interviewed her. Her name is Isabel. She works through her company as IOV Community Planning and Consulting. What we are going to suggest to council is to do a part-time interim contract through the end of February. My thought is that will give us a few months to see what it's like. A planner, contract planner, as opposed to a paid planner, which was what Kyle was. We got 40 hours a week for Kyle plus. He came up once a week to be on site. The planner would come up once a month. They would be here in person for the planning board. All other meetings would be via Zoom or paid separate. We agreed that we've got the 2024, the plan to begin the comp plan in 2024. That would be a separate contract. She would do that as a flat rate contract, which we want. We want that to be a flat rate. Otherwise, what we are suggesting is probably 15 to a maximum of 20 hours a week. So that takes time away that we'll have to cover with other people to do economic development and other work. But it's what she can fit in. $60 an hour. So the total cost will be somewhere between $20,700 and $27,600. If we end up with a lot of development, some of that might be able to be allocated to the TIF. So when I look at, we had a budget of $109,939.16 total wages and benefits for our town planner. By the time we get to the end of Kyle's abbreviated contract, we will have expended for this year $23,849.86. So that leaves us a total budget of $86,089.30. Half of that was allocated to the TIF and half of that was allocated to planning. So if you looked at $43,044.65, which would all be planning, no economic development, we have plenty of money, even if we extend this through the end of the year. My plan, the contract that we're looking at does have a clause that allows to terminate with cause. It allows either party to do that. So if we get in and it's just not working, we'll have a way out. I can't imagine. She comes with great references and she was very personable. So I think she'll do fine. But the plan would be to wait and kind of watch for a couple of months and to see how that works, see how many hours we really need. And if it makes sense to try to cover some of those hours in a different way, maybe also that could be covered under the TIF. Then probably when you get to late December, early January, we would either look at an RFQ, which would be a request for qualifications, or some kind of an employment process. I just look at what other planning agencies around us have gone through to get planners, and they have a really hard time to get them, and they have a really hard time keeping them. So that is going to be my plan for the town planner. My plan for the other person that gave notice while I was on vacation is the assistant town manager. And that is not as easy. And I am not ready to talk about the full plan. Working with senior staff, I came back early from vacation to begin that work. I am hoping to have something to share with the council chair and then with the finance and operations committee chair to get to a point to share with the council how I'm gonna manage that. So for right now, the plan is to not take a quick step, but it does mean that capacity is going to decrease, and it's not 40 hours a week. She did not work 40 hours a week. And when you start moving those jobs, the ones that absolutely still have to be done, to other people, you're taking it away from somebody who's done it for 12 years and can pretty much do it in their sleep to somebody who's learning something brand new. So it is really going to impact the capacity. The other place it impacts is that our assistant town manager was the project support and the contingency for department heads. So it's going to slow down across the board, and we've got to get it figured out to try to meet some of the articulated goals of council with some of the needs. And I think it's going to be more than a 10-minute conversation on how we do it. And I'm not sure that the answer is to simply put an ad in the paper for the assistant town manager position, because the way that always works is you hire a manager and that position morphs to cover what the needs of the manager are. And so you build a unicorn, you build it for a unicorn. And so we really need to think about what the base needs are and then build it out from there. And whether it is in my office or not, I don't know.
One of the things that Sophie and I have discussed over the past week or so is that, maybe 2 weeks now, is that what we'd rather do is more thoughtfully look at a restructuring of our systems rather than quickly fill a position, even if it means that in the short term, our efficiency is impacted in some way. So, but I'd rather build something that has some capacity to move into the future. So I think Sophie is great.
So the other staff transition that has not gone out to council because it was just formalized is my executive assistant has given notice that she is moving up her retirement date. She's still working on the date. We know right now it won't be anywhere past January 18th. So that moved up quite a bit.
Ooh, times of transition, but congratulations to everyone who's accepting exciting new chapters in their life. So Kyle and Belle online and Nancy.
That's what
you will all be missed.
Do you have anything else for finance and operations? All right. We usually break for public comment. So Belle, is there any public comment online? All right. Moving on. Move it to Environment Committee, and I'm cognizant of time. So feel free to.
Thanks everyone for having me. I just wanted to introduce myself quickly. So I'm Megan. I'm the Environmental Services Coordinator. I moved to Maine 6 years ago, and I to get my master's at the university. And so I have my degree in ecology and environmental sciences. Primarily, I did work on aquatic toxicology and how heavy metals flow through the aquatic habitat. I also worked a lot with national parks on how to relay scientific research to the public. So that's a passion that I have of mine as well. So I was hired here 2 years ago, and one of the first tasks that the town gave me was to enroll in the Community Resilience Partnership. And this is through the governor's office. And so this is the first page of the supplemental material that Sophie had sent out. And I thought it was important to give you guys an update on this and timeline of how it came to be. So one of the first tasks of this is getting enrolled in this partnership is to go through basically a series of checklists and from the governor's office saying, what is the town doing versus what is the town not doing? And so we worked with all the departments to get this filled out to see where we were at. And once we did that, the Environment Advisory Group, which is a group of residents that give me feedback about things that they're passionate about or maybe expertise that they have from the university about environmental topics. We wanted to do kind of a 3-tier approach for this first climate action grant, which was in March of 2022. And this 3-tiered approach was really about the community. How can we spread education about, rebates or heat pump rebates or things like that? And how can we let everybody know about some of these projects? We wanted to do a municipal section of that as well. So looking at the municipal building energy audits, which is a report that if anybody's interested in that, I'm happy to send you. And then a regional, which is the climate action and adaptation plan phase 1. So this funded a greenhouse gas inventory for the greater Bangor region and the vulnerability assessment. If you want more information on that project, just because of the sake of time, it's all online at penobscotclimateaction.org. Or I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well.
So Megan is going to send me the energy efficiency audit in its cleanest version, and I will put it in your building assessment folder. Sure. Awesome. Thank you. I probably should have asked.
No problem. Yeah, so this is a quick update of many different things. Awesome. I'll try my best. So this fall, I'm excited to tell you that we're doing 2 different projects, which is the Orono Energy Efficiency Fair in October, which is on the 7th. That I'll need a little bit of your feedback on this evening. And then the window dressers event, which is creating insulating window inserts for residents. And so the reason that we're able to do that again this fall is because we had funds left over from this March 2022 grant funding that I didn't want to give that grant funding away. So we rolled it over for another event. So I say, let's just jump right into the Orono Energy Efficiency Fair. On that first page, it does tell you the rest of the action grants, the climate action grants that we applied for and why, but I think just to streamline this a little bit, we can jump right into the fair. So again, that's on October 7th, all day, and it's free to attend. And what I would be looking for is recommendations from you guys on local contractors or local vendors that in the greater Bangor area, maybe right outside, that would want to come and have a table. So right now we have 9 vendors and we have space for about 20. So we have good room for that, but I would just need to know any feedback or recommendations by September 1st. And you can email that to me or Sophie with any recommendations on vendors. Again, it's free for them, so they can just come show up with all of their materials. We're trying to highlight local vendors because I know South Portland and Portland typically do energy efficient fairs, and we want to have one up here for these folks doing that kind of work up here. Specifically, I am looking to still get electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging stations people to sign up, community connector or any public transit. Unfortunately, some of the bike shops and the bike coalition are not able to come this year. And then some of the campus initiatives are not able to come this year as well. So we'll be looking to spread the word about that. Move right along.
Yes.
Okay. The second event is the window dressers event, which is the week after. So we're hoping to get some traction at the Energy Efficiency Fair as well for some volunteers. We have about 150 inserts already for local residents. And there's also a pot of money that was secured from the New England Grassroots Environmental Fund that I got this spring to provide $2,000 to subsidize free inserts for either low income or elderly residents for now, which we are excited about as well. The leftover funding from March 2022 will also be used to hire Miles Martin, who is a recent graduate from the University of Maine. And he's excited to be helping me coordinate that event because it's a very, very long days for a whole week to get everybody's inserts built. So if you guys are interested in spreading the word or volunteering at this event, I know Leo was there last year helping as well. It's a fun time. We play some music and eat food and build some inserts.
Do a lot of people that you did it for in previous years still, do they still have their inserts, I assume, and they last multiple years probably?
Yeah, some people that came to volunteer last year said that they've had theirs from like 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they said that most of the times they just leave them right in the window and all year round. And
it's a really cool process. You know, I would say any monkey can do it because I was able to. So it was cool. It's little mini manufacturing right there at Keith Anderson.
Yeah,
it's nice.
They're great. And for anyone who has like a rip in their insert as well, there's an opportunity to get them repaired. You don't need to buy a whole new one, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Go.
That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for the work you do. Thank you. Public comment on environment committee issues. Anybody online?
Just a quick question. Do we, if Rose's can't do it, have we looked at other bike shops in the area or talked to any?
I personally have not yet. No.
Sophie, can we put it on our list that we get an update on the invasive plant monitoring grant when the season is all wrapped up and we know what the results of that grant were? How effective was it? How many people did we talk to? That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks.
That sounds really like, as this is a different kind of committee, the advisory board. I know like for our council committees, there's a clear format online for people who are interested to volunteer how to fill that out. But for these kind of committees that are different, that are appointed staff committees, that's people are invited, or how does that happen?
We still have it on the box about,
okay.
And I think trails, I think is still on there too. So if it comes through, if it's a staff committee, we refer it to staff.
So it's still, if people are interested in that advisory board and have a skill set, they should get on the website, fill out the form, and that's how they can get involved with Megan and the good work that she's doing. Yep, great. Thank you.
Let's transition to Community Development Committee. Sure.
Kyle.
Great, Kyle. We're going to first talk about review of the proposed land use ordinance revision related to the affordable housing and density. We did get a presentation from Kyle, right, in September on kind of why, and this looks like we're starting to talk about the how. July rather. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so that presentation sort of outlined what was coming along. So this is all in relation to.
What meeting was that, Kyle? Just so if anyone watching home wants to go back and watch it on YouTube.
I don't remember the exact date, but it was one of the.
It's in my favorites.
Council committee meetings.
Okay.
So, but yeah, if anyone's curious, we can look it up afterwards and they can reach out and we can point them in the right direction. So yeah, this is in reference to what was originally LD 2003, which was the state housing laws that were implemented. As we talked about in the presentation, it's primarily requiring that communities implement kind of 3 distinct housing goals or policies into their ordinances. So one is this idea of affordable housing developments, which is basically an incentive approach that if you meet certain affordable housing thresholds within a subdivision, that you can achieve this density bonus. That's 2.5 times the base density that's allowed in that zone. The second thing is this idea of having multiple principal residential structures on a single lot. In most communities, you have one home on a lot. So you might have a single family dwelling or a duplex or a multi-family structure. Some communities like Orono allows accessory dwelling units. But the whole point there is that it's an accessory dwelling unit. It's not a second principal structure. So this section would allow more than one principal primary kind of dwelling structure on a single lot. So instead of, if you have a big lot, instead of needing to break it into two and have frontage and all that for both lots, you could just put two single family homes, for instance, on one lot with a, more of a driveway connecting the two of them. And then the third thing that it really looks at is those accessory dwelling units, which again, for us here in Orono, we already allow. We just had to make some minor revisions there. So if you just kind of go through, the order of things, first is, we needed to add some definitions. The affordable housing development definitions come right from the state law and, what they use for their definitions. Same with base density and the existing dwelling units. We do need to add a definition for, the idea of a shared driveway, because, we have standards for curb cuts and driveways, for a residential use or something on a lot, single family home. But if we're potentially allowing 3 or 4 single family homes or duplexes on a single lot, and people aren't required to build a road like you would in a normal subdivision, this idea of accessibility and safe access, and you don't want cars parked blocking someone from getting in and out of their lot. So had to add a bit of standards there. Talking with fire department and public works, we tried to work in some performance standards there. So then section 2, or where it says amend the schedule of uses, talking about the accessory building setback. We can touch on that later when we talk about the accessory dwelling units. So that number 3, the amend section 18-132 lot and yard requirements. So this is where we've kind of housed the idea of allowing multiple principal structures on a lot. So C1 there talks about the idea of if a lot has an existing single family home, you would now be able to theoretically put a second single family home there and potentially a duplex. So you could have up to a duplex and a second single family home, or you could, have 2 single family homes if you only wanted 2 units. Our ordinance already allows duplexes in every zoning district anyway, so that's not really something that needed to be covered there. So that's what that section is for. The next section, or the next, C2 there covers lots that aren't currently developed. So if it's just a vacant, undeveloped lot and it's in the town's growth area, that state law requires that communities allow up to 4 dwelling units. So those 4 dwellings could be 4 single family homes. It could be 2 single family homes and a duplex. It could be 2 duplexes, some configuration of that. So this doesn't really talk about multifamily structures, because obviously a multifamily structure would have all units in one building. And this is talking about multiple buildings. Multifamily would be handled the same way it is now. It's allowed in our village commercial, it's allowed in the C2, those types of districts. There'd be no change to like our normal review process around homes. So for instance, here, if someone had a single family home already on a lot and they were interested in putting a second single family home, they would just need to go through that building permit process like they would now. It's just that now we're also considering these new types of lots where there's already a home on it in the process, where, normally right now we wouldn't do that. We would only consider putting a new single family home on a vacant lot right now. So nothing really changes from a review standpoint. It just opens up some additional chances around the town where you could see additional single family and 2 family homes go in. But, again, duplexes are already allowed in every zone in the town, including our agriculture district and low density. That's not, a lot of main communities might have, certain areas where only single family homes are allowed. It's not something we have to worry about changing there. number 3 is more of a, to kind of avoid anyone looking to do some sort of loophole or something, where you have an existing home and then after this goes into effect, they demolish the home and say, hey, now my lot is vacant, so I can put up the 4 units instead of the 3 units, which is what would normally be allowed with an existing home. Why the state made a differentiation between lots with existing family homes and lots that were undeveloped, I'm not really sure. I don't know why having 3 units on a lot with an existing family home and 4 units on undeveloped lots when you could have each of those lots right next door to each other in an existing neighborhood. I'm not really sure what the logic there is. I imagine it's just to maintain some sort of consistency to say in a neighborhood where it's largely already developed and you have single family homes primarily on every lot. We don't want to introduce too much of a shift in the change of scale in those neighborhoods. So we're only going to allow 3 units in those situations, whereas on undeveloped pieces of land where it's something entirely new going in, we're going to allow a little more. I don't know. Again, as we talked about at the meeting when we did the presentation, we sort of worked this ordinance amendment just to meet the minimum threshold to comply with the state law, and that if there were additional areas that council or the community wanted to explore around housing and kind of these topics, that it would probably be easier to meet the minimum compliance measures now and then have bigger discussions around those things later. So that could certainly be something addressed.
I probably wouldn't even use the term easier. I think that you run into issues with the comp plan, and we're going right into a comp planning period. So it made more sense to be legal now and then talk to the community about what they want to do in addition to meeting the legal requirement.
Right, because just for instance, you could take what is talked about in LD 2003 to the community right now, and there's probably a number of community members who wouldn't even want that change made. There are probably many in support of it, but there could be people opposed to it. So introducing new changes outside of what's required in LD 2003, it would be better to have a larger scale conversation about kind of community goals for those sorts of neighborhoods and what people's kind of general expectation is and what they're okay with, and a much larger conversation with those specific neighborhoods and getting their feedback before making those sorts of changes. So yeah, moving on to C4 there, that's when we start introducing the access standards around the shared driveway, making sure that adequate access for residents on those lots and emergency vehicles is in place. And then 5 is just talking about not really changing the density allowances. So just because you can now put 2, 3, 4 homes on a lot, that doesn't change the allowed density that already exists in the zoning ordinance. And that's one of the things that is clarified in the state law, is that existing minimum lot size per dwelling unit that we already have for every zoning district, that would still apply. So, if you're in the medium density district and you have a single family home and the minimum lot size per dwelling is 15,000 square feet, if you wanted to add a second single family home to your lot, you would need a 30,000 square foot lot to do that, which there are some of those. So those opportunities are there. But this isn't saying that every person in the MDR with a 5, 10, 15,000 square foot lot can just go build a second single family home or a duplex on their lot. All right, so moving on to the next section, the accessory dwelling units. You can see it is largely unchanged. So we talked about, we already allow these in general. We do have some standards in place, the 500 square foot maximum floor area, not being more than 1 bedroom, which you'd be unlikely to see with such a structure of that size anyway. Again, there's an occupancy limit of 2 people, which, and you're not likely to see something more than that. The idea of these ADUs is that you are renting it out to, providing a smaller living space for, an individual or a couple individuals looking for that sort of space. The one thing that we did have to remove here is the language around the additional parking spaces that were required for ADUs. So the state law is pretty clear that you can only require parking for what's normally required for a single family dwelling. You can't require any additional parking for the ADUs. So we require, an extra right now 2 parking spaces for an ADU. We wouldn't be allowed to require that. Now, that's not to say someone building an ADU on their lot couldn't provide additional parking. If they wanted to, they can. This kind of goes back to our conversation around minimum parking requirements. It's that leave that more up to the person and what they think they need to satisfy the parking on their lot versus, the municipality requiring people to build parking that they might not need. And then the other change is in subsection 10 there, where it talks about, a minimum lot size requirement of 0.2 acres. The state law states that a municipality can have any sort of minimum dimensional requirement for a lot within ADU. Anywhere that a single family home is allowed, you would have to allow an accessory dwelling unit. The one condition there is you can't make the lot more non-conforming. So if, for instance, there was nowhere to put an accessory dwelling unit on the lot that didn't encroach on a setback, you wouldn't be able to put it in and have it right up to the property line, for instance. You have to meet all those dimensional requirements, but if, let's say, an MDR lot is 10,000 square feet, which is technically a non-conforming lot, but it still gives plenty of room to have a 300 square foot ADU in your backyard or something, you would be able to do it. And then the last section is in regards to the affordable housing developments. So this is creating a new section in our land use ordinance. It, sort of works the same as our cluster development standards. What it's doing is saying, if you meet all of these items in D there in the applicability section, then you're allowed to have this density bonus of up to 2.5 times the base density. So, one, it has to meet those affordable housing development definitions that were at the beginning of the amendment. 2, it has to be located in the town's designated growth area, which is pretty much east of 95. So, we're not talking anything out in the agriculture, low density zone. And then, even within that growth area, it's specifically allowed in areas where multifamily dwellings are allowed. So you wouldn't even see these types of developments be possible in the MDR, for instance. This would be kind of exclusively an option in the Village Commercial, the Commercial 2 district, and any high density residential areas. Those would be kind of the main 3 areas where a project like this could take place. So, basically, if all those requirements are met and someone was proposing a project, we would just take that minimum lot size per dwelling allowance, and you say you can have 2.5 times the amount of housing that you would normally have there. That being said, that still has to go through any normal site plan and subdivision process. So things like, water quality and, access to water and sewer and, traffic generation and all those things are still being reviewed. So it's not it's not as though if you just meet those few criteria, a project is just done and it goes in without further review. You still have to meet all those normal kind of review criteria that the planning board would look for in any other subdivision or site plan application. So yeah, that pretty much covers all of the changes that we'd be introducing here. I think that would bring us into compliance with all of the requirements of the law, but happy to go into any further detail on it.
Does anyone have any questions?
No, thanks for your work on that. The approach of let's do what's in the law and save further details for the comp plan makes a lot of sense to me in this context.
For the chair and the town manager, I guess I would ask, what's the timeline? Just come to the council meeting in September? Do we do this? Okay.
No, it actually, we would be looking for you to refer this to the planning board because its first step is the planning board.
Good.
And planning board makes a finding of whether or not it's compatible or consistent with the current comprehensive plan. The fact that it's to meet statutory requirements kind of trumps it because I will tell you now it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And then that will come back to you with Kyle used to write up these wonderful reports that I will talk with Isabel about getting his template for that will come back to council in usually I would expect late September, and we would be looking at it for probably noticing a public hearing so that we can get the changes made. I'll have to talk about the timeline with Kyle before he leaves.
Okay. Yeah, so notice for September planning board meeting goes out this month. So as long as council was okay with that part of it, we could get it on the agenda for the planning board in September and then write the memo and following stuff would come after that.
Okay. Any other questions?
My question is, what happens when the state does something like this and you don't update our ordinance?
Well, then you have an inconsistency and you create a lot of problems for staff and the community.
Yeah.
There's no, I don't think there are any penalties built into the state law. So, I mean, I think if, you know, any community didn't update, you know, based on that, if no one ever came forward with a project like that, you know, it would probably go unnoticed. But if someone came forward and tried to do something and said, hey, this is legal, this is a requirement, state law is telling you you have to allow this, and then challenge the town in that way, it's probably run into some different.
So remember, your planning board and your code officer are charged with ensuring compliance in their permitting with ordinances and state law. So that's what we run into.
Yeah. No, obviously it makes sense that we do this. I am always curious about what towns without planners do. And
yeah, so that's why they extended the deadline, I think, to give some more time, because yeah, specifically those towns with fewer resources or without zoning altogether, we're having less of a or we're having more of a hard time certain things. And but yeah, as a lot of it is tied to areas, you know, with like the affordable housing developments within a growth area or, you know, things like that. You know, there are certain things that smaller communities might not have to do that, you know, other communities with formalized zoning do. But yeah, it's certainly a hassle. I think, yeah, a lot of those meetings, smaller communities did come out and voice a number of those concerns.
Kyle, is this state law already in effect, or does it have so it's already in effect and we're just having a certain amount of time where we're allowed to get our laws in compliance with theirs?
Yeah,
okay.
So the original date to have municipalities adopt something was the July 1, but then that got pushed back to January to give people a little more time.
Thank you. Before you move on.
Sure.
The last time that the we had the conversation about LD 2003 was July 17th of this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the next topic. I called this my fast communication lesson. I appreciate Jeff, the chair, giving us time to talk about it. We have Orono was part of a OTO fiber, which had reached an agreement, a public-private partnership with what is now GoNet Speed to build leverage fiber that the OTO owned through public grant and local contributions with planned investments in our community to build out a fiber network for many people who live in Orono, but not everybody who lives in Orono. Where I live in particular on Page Place, and to be transparent about it, I live there. We saw conduit go into the street last fall and started reaching out to the company this spring. Conduit is just the empty, container waiting for the fiber, and where we have underground utilities. And I was under the expectation that we were part of this agreement, and we were not. And I'm glad that I asked the company and the town. We got some good feedback. But as we talked about it this spring and summer, GoNet Speed was able to get it onto their project list to finish the build out, even though we weren't part of their actual commitment. And I believe we're going to hear tonight, there are other parts of the town that they expanded into. And I think this is a celebration of a public-private partnership that has had a big impact. I think everybody deserves, hi Heidi. I think everyone deserves access to a faster, more affordable, more reliable internet. And I'm excited to give GoNet Speed a chance to talk briefly about what they were able to accomplish as part of this partnership in our community. And I'm going to ask us to ask ourselves, maybe not tonight, but at some point, what kind of conversations do we have about expanding fiber to people in parts of Orono who don't have access to it yet? And it may not be, could be different approaches, different partnerships. But so Heidi, can you give us thank you very much for joining us tonight. And thank you very much for the responsiveness of your company to the concerns that some of our citizens and frankly my neighbors have had, and myself, about service. So can you take it away?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to try to share my screen because I have a couple of slides to go through with you folks. But just really quick, my name is Heidi Mahoney. I'm the manager of government affairs over at GoNet Speed. It is my job to make connections. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, well, we can hear you, but I think we need the volume a little higher here in the audio.
Oh. I'll let you.
It's tough. Packed on. It's like a Taylor Swift show. We got to get the.
I was just thinking they took words out.
Yeah.
I can just keep talking. You can tell me when it's a good level for you.
We're almost there.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Give us. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
It's better.
All right, cool. So a little bit about me. My name is Heidi Mahoney. I'm the manager of government affairs here at GoNet Speed. My job is a couple of different areas. One is to make connections with the towns that we're going to be building a fiber network in, but also to track things that are going on in legislation, also to make sure that we're keeping in line with any grant funding that is out there for broadband services. So
hold on a second. Heidi, we've lost you all together for a second.
okay.
You're not on mute, so.
I'm not on mute.
Sorry.
I think you might have lost your microphone. Maybe it's switched to a different one, or earbuds connected or something. That's often what happens.
How's that?
We're back.
I have like 4 different speakers here, so sometimes it happens. Where did you guys stop hearing me?
You're talking about grants and.
Oh yeah. So that's another part of what I do here is track grant funding, make sure that we're in line with what the state is doing for broadband expansion in the state. So your contract with Otelco is the same as with GoNet Speed. And I just wanted to give you guys just a little bit of information on GoNet speed, as well as what we did with the fiber. So I will try to share my screen here. Let me know if you can see it.
We got it.
Sweet. All right. So in 2021, 6 companies purchased from a investor company called Oak Hill Capital. One of those companies is Otelco, which you folks have heard of, and then 3 other telephone companies, as well as 2 fiber construction companies. Which is great because that gives us a ton of experience, not only in DSL copper service, but we're transferring all of that information over to fiber lines, but also we have the resources available to us to actually get that work done in those construction companies that we have. So tons of experience. Really, Otelco hasn't gone anywhere in terms of the people that were working there before. So this is what it sort of looks like for our footprint. We have a big presence in Maine, mostly in the Northeast. You can see a few outliers here in Missouri and Alabama, and that was a result of sort of us picking up those additional companies. Just to get right into it, because I know you guys, it's a late in the meeting, so we'll get right into it. So the existing auto fiber was a total of about 6 miles. These 2 pictures show where that fiber was, which I'm sure that you all are aware of. And then this is where we, on the left-hand side, you can see here, attachment C is where our promised fiber build plan was around those 6 miles of fiber. And then on the right-hand side, you can see where our completed fiber build was. So we not only did what we said we were going to do in the contract, but we built a little bit more. So in total, we utilized the 6 miles of fiber that was in the contract with you folks, and we constructed an additional 50 miles. So 56 miles total that we constructed to service approximately 4,000 addresses right now. And our private investment in that build out was $3 million. I'll stop there to see if you have any questions about the contract, about how things went, when it was available, if you folks have any questions regarding that.
I'm gonna have a question about next steps, but does anybody have any contracts, any questions about their delivery on the expectations that we had as part of that contract? Thank you.
Cool. And then I wanted to put our current pricing on here now. What I want to highlight about the speeds for fiber, which you folks probably already know, is that it's symmetrical. So when you're getting 300 upload speed, you're also getting 300 download speed, which is really important when people are working remotely and kids are working from home, and you're able to do these Zoom calls and not have a lot of interruption. It's very resilient, future-proof service for you. So these are our initial prices for those particular packages. In all transparency, the prices do go up by $10 a month after the first year. We do try to be very transparent about that. We won't sneak prices up on you. We let you know that it will go up by $10, but you won't continually see pricing go up. That's all I had, because I wanted to keep it brief for you folks.
So thank you. When we talk about what comes next, what GoNet speed, if there are those of us who believe that everyone in Orono ought to have access to high speed internet, just like education services, transportation services. Not everyone has access to public water and sewer, but if we have that expectation for ourselves and we want to be fair, how does a company like GoNet Speed as a private provider look at expanding in our community more? And what kinds of conversations do we need to have about either expanding a partnership that's already been successful or building a new partnership, with your company or someone else?
Different things here. We typically build in phases. We'll evaluate the success of the network in the town and the availability of similar services from competitors. We continue to review our network in an Orono, as an example. And as we start to be successful in a town, that allows us to build into another phase. Because it's privately funded money, we have to answer to our investors on, was the money well spent? Are we getting the return on investment so that we can expand? But with that being said, your area is served by Consolidated Communications. They are the one of the pole owners on the utility poles in your area. And I know that, so we overbuilt them in that area because they are expanding their fiber product into many areas. So please keep the lines of communication open with us and vice versa. We will with you to let you know how this service is going, how signups are going, how can we be involved in the community and be a part of it so that people know we're there. And that really lends us to the ability to really expand our network, which we do often.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I don't have any more questions. I very much appreciate you being with us and the responsiveness. I don't endorse any particular company over any other, but I'm grateful that we're in a position to get services to people that they need and want in our town.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come meet. It was really great to hear from you.
Yeah, no problem. I will send out the slides for you, Dan. I think I've already sent them to your email, so you have those. But if you folks have any additional questions, please let me know.
Okay.
I think Sarah has one.
Sarah's got a question.
I do, but it's for you, and also maybe Dan knows or other folks here on council too. Just in terms of, again, accessibility for everyone. I know especially during the pandemic, there was lots of grant funding for lower income folks to get access to internet, especially during that time. Do you work with those programs? Do all the companies in our town work with those programs? For anyone listening, I also just want to make sure it's out there for folks who need some sort of financial assistance.
I'm really glad you brought that up. We do participate in ACP, which is the Affordable Connectivity Program. That is funded. We're hoping that it continues to get funded through the government. As of right now, that's sort of up in the air. However, we participate. The program that we have is a $30 a month program, which is the stipend that the government gives out. It's over 100 service, so again, symmetrical. But it would be something that folks who qualify for would go and sign up for in your area if we're available to them in that particular spot.
And the Maine Connectivity Authority, which is an agency that I've done some work with and for, is really involved in the space, and there's a great deal of federal resources becoming available to help people get access. It may not be an infrastructure question for some people, as Sarah mentioned. It's very much barriers. So,
true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Thank you for the time on that. I appreciate it.
Dan, I just have a question for you.
Sure.
You don't have poles, right?
We're underground. So, and there are other communities.
Yeah, because that was something that was talked about everywhere that I went when I talked to people who didn't have poles. They all are asking the same question: how can we get fiber into our neighborhood? So it's not just your neighborhood,
right? Yeah. And I'd like to work just as hard for those neighborhoods as I did for my own. Because I think that I think we were fortunate because we were just intermixed with everything else downtown where they added us. But I think that, I think it's an important conversation for us to have about how we can help. And you're going to be a part of that. So. Next topic for us was the discussing proposing a town charter change to move the annual municipal elections to November. One vote. There's been one eye. Really love it. So Sophie provided us with everyone with a proposed town a timeline, a town charter revision referendum timeline. Which is very helpful. Give us an idea of what, and this is not a meeting to discuss the pros and cons of this, but to schedule out the logistics of having the conversation with the community. And there are a lot of elements in this timeline. This is our process, and I think council would need to have another process in terms of engagement with the community because it's the town's charter, it's not the town council's charter. But so we have this. Sophie, do you want to?
Sure, a couple of things. The first is this is based on my assessment that this is a minor change, that it's not a structural change to the charter and therefore can go through an abbreviated process. I've reached out twice to the town attorney, who's very busy, and have not gotten the confirmation of that. But in our process, we do require confirmation from the town attorney. The second thing is, I would say that this is one of the things that I think staff needs before we begin the full process here is to have understanding that a majority of council wants to do this. At this point, there have been individual conversations. I think that there are several on council that want to do it, but there formally hasn't been a conversation about, is this something you want to move forward on? And so in order for me to do my due diligence, I really kind of want to know that this is something that has a majority of council that wants to do it. And the second piece is to get more of a sense of how specific you want to be with a change. If is it just a matter of moving it to a November election that coincides with the state, or the state doesn't have one a day, that normal day, or is there more? Because I've only heard bits and pieces, so I want to make sure I understand and don't waste a lot of everybody's time and the town's money trying to hit a target. If we could just talk about it.
Is there any discussion? I mean, we heard from you, but I mean, is there anyone that wants to kick off? I'm happy to share too, but I'd like to.
I would.
Yeah.
So I've poked around and I have my own thoughts from living here, obviously, but personally, I think when it comes to local elections, UMaine students are probably closer to guests in this community than they are residents. That's my personal take, and I think it's supported by the fact there's a state law that says when you move to Maine, you've got 30 days to transfer your license to the state. I would bet there are probably zero students that come here and transfer their license. Unless they're,
I know some personally.
yeah, but
and
my hunch would be they were probably maybe graduate students that are living off campus or something like that. I don't think you're going to find many freshmen at sophomore or juniors at the dorms putting their dorm address on their license and renewing a Maine license with that.
But I was one who did as soon as I moved here when I was an undergrad. I mean, I know that's anecdotal, but yeah. I think it's more common than you're characterizing.
So if I could just interrupt for 1 minute, because I want to be very clear. Staff has absolutely no opinion about when the election should happen, other than we ask that you not do 2 elections in a row. Like
that makes total sense.
Yeah, so we'd like to keep that language in here. But I want to just speak to Leo, that you're right, that is what the statute says, but the statute also goes on to give very clear guidance around people who are attending school as registered voters.
Yeah, I understand that, but
again,
it's also not consistent if it's requiring, and there's a fine if you don't do it. I'm sure there are a handful that do it. I don't think it's done on the regular, and I don't. That's anecdotal as well. I certainly don't know. I know my kids have gone to school out of state, and I can guarantee you they didn't get a license that said that they lived there. That's and the other piece to this is there are 12,000 students at the university. We've got 10,500 in Orono. Therefore, that community, and they're all voting age, obviously, at the university. And the census data on Orono is, I think, hard for everyone because of those 10,000, probably 5,000 are students. And again, whether they're registering their license here or transferring their license, some may, but that does cut down a significant amount. And further, there's obviously a large segment of the population in the town of Orono that are residents that aren't voting age. So if we have, and there's all kinds of estimates out there, but if we have 5,000 eligible voters in the town that are residents compared to 12,000 at the university, I feel like that this was probably done intentionally so we didn't have the University of Maine temporary students. Most are here for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. I would love for more to stay and remain here. And some do, obviously, but they're temporary residents.
Yeah,
and I get that they have the ability to vote, and I'm opposed to it, but I get that that's there.
Are you saying you don't want them to vote?
Not in a local election.
So yeah, I just want to get that straight.
Yeah,
right? You're saying that you don't want college students to vote in local elections.
I would,
okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to have that out in the open.
Yep.
All right.
So
I disagree, but
because they are legally allowed to vote.
Yeah,
I think to make a decision here, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but to make a decision here on the basis that we actually do want to discriminate against certain eligible voters would be probably a poor line of reasoning for making a decision one way or the other on this matter. I also want to say I am very much in favor of people who live here having representation in the government that affects their day-to-day lives as long as they're here in the town. I think that's actually really important to me for democratic accountability and for us to represent everybody who is here and needs representation in the place that they are living as long as they're here, whether they're temporary or not, or stay as I have. So I just want to put that out there, but I think that's very important. I do see on this, I'm for moving this to a time that is more accessible to all of our residents, including our student residents. One question I have about moving it to November, if it coincides with the regular sort of larger election statewide, federal, is we had a presentation by, what's it? Tom Schwartz, who was it who gave us a presentation on?
Was it Rob Glover?
Rob Glover, sorry, I don't know why I said Tom Schwartz. Rob Glover can give us a presentation on sort of several different aspects of elections, funding of council positions, like what that does for who gets to be involved. But part of that discussion, we were talking about partisanship in elections and how this body has traditionally been quite a nonpartisan one. I think that's one of its virtues and strengths, is that we are not sort of arguing across party lines regularly, and that coinciding an election with the November larger elections could potentially increase partisanship. I don't know how much data there is on this and whether that should sway us, but I think that's worth bringing up. But overall, I am for moving the election to a more accessible time. It's not November, it's something else.
So can I, just because this is a conversation that's been had multiple times in the time I've been here. I think another concern that came up with November, which has been discussed, was the concern that when the election is the only thing going on, it gets some attention. And the fear that it will become like the county race where you don't really pay much attention to who is running, and you just, you know what I mean? They get lost. So I think, you know, that I understand kind of both the partisan piece, and I hope it's not just a virtue. I hope it's the foundation of local government in Maine. But would it meet your need to change to simply move the date? Because in March, are you concerned that it is, I've heard two concerns. I've heard one that it can coincide with breaks. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. The other concern I heard was more recent from sitting councilors about a desire to maybe have counselors come in, have the benefit of operating the town for a while, and then come up with a budget. So from an operational standpoint, when you look at the June and November elections, the issue that we would want to kind of stay away from is overlapping nomination and absentee balloting periods. So in March, that's why we changed the charter a couple of years ago to say it's the second Tuesday, except when the state decides to hold a primary election, which is going to happen, which is why the election will be on March 5th this coming year. So I think it would be helpful to kind of dial in when you're thinking about or what the circumstances are. So I could go back to the town clerk and map out the rest of the cycle. If you're thinking that November might not be the time, we could give you kind of like block out what already would be overlap. Because I don't think you want to do a June election because that doesn't meet your need.
Does this, how will this interact with school board and school budget?
So council needs to kind of come up with what it's looking for. School budget would stay in June. That's a referendum deadline. That's not our annual municipal election, which is what you're talking about. You would then, if you came up with an idea, I would assume I would be reaching out to the superintendent to share where we are, and she would talk to her board. And if they had an issue with it, they would come back and talk to you. They haven't been bashful in the past, so I would think that it would start a conversation. But I know, just talking to school board members, that when we sat two new school board people partway through their budget process, which was literally partway through there, they were almost done. And it really kind of put a wrinkle in things. So they might have some of the same concerns you have.
Start their budget process earlier than us.
Yeah, I think they get their DD 214 in like February.
Is there any?
Oh wait, not a DD 214. It's the, yeah, you know it.
I guess, I mean, I think that I think both of the questions raised about whether it would increase partisanship and whether there'd be less attention to the election, both seem like important questions to me. I also want to say though, that I think that a November date would potentially just increase voter turnout in general a lot. So it is possible that people would pay less attention to the local race, or it's possible that many people who typically never show up to vote in the local election, and I'm not speaking about students, just anyone around town who doesn't show up for that might be more likely to show up when they're showing up for a state or federal election anyway. So, I mean, my guess is that it increases voter turnout across the board because more people are voting in that election. And that just matters to me. I guess I just want to say on the record, it matters to me that all eligible voters, you know, as many as possible vote, and whatever we can do to make it easy for all eligible voters in our town to vote is what I want to do.
Yeah.
My woohoo earlier was probably clear enough, but I also strongly in favor of moving the election. And I do think that November feels like it has a pretty high ratio of benefits to trade-offs, as we've detailed.
Yeah, I've got a couple things, but I wanted to.
Well, I hesitate to endorse moving the election, not because I don't want people to vote. I came here as a student. I got involved in the community as a student and as a graduate student. I think it's important to have as many avenues open to engage people as possible. I'm also a history teacher, and I value the idea that communities develop an identity, and that identity becomes part of the culture of a community. And I'm cautious about throwing those identities away, particularly in an era when we seem to be homogenizing the landscape so that every town seems like every other town, right? So every area has its Walmart, everybody has its, I don't know, XYZ steakhouse. And I just think one of the things that for me has made Orono special has been the sense that you come here as a student and you grow into becoming a member of the community. And so when I came here as a student, not knowing a lot about Orono, but I hopefully being a little bit civic minded, I learned the rituals and the routine of our community, and that became very important to me. So I guess I hesitate in endorsing a change right off the bat, although I don't dismiss it out of hand, but it's hard for me just to raise my hand tonight and say that it's the right thing to do. Yeah. So that's where I'm at, and I'd like to, approach it thoughtfully. And I really appreciate what Sophie said about having staff maybe lay out what they think are the parameters of a change. And then we can vote on the merits of that change. And if we vote yes, if the majority votes yes, it's one thing, and then it goes to referendum. That's where I'm at.
Anyway. Well, I'm for changing it to a time where I don't think a college town should hold its elections during spring break. I looked really closely at this back in February, March when I was running for office. And we have 300 employees who are UMaine employees who are registered Orono voters who are likely not traveling for personal reasons or professional reasons during spring break. Thousands of registered voters who, whether they're lifelong residents or not, they're here now. And I'm of the belief that there's nothing more fundamental in a democracy than the right to choose where you participate. You get one vote, but you get to choose where you use it. And if you meet the criteria set forth by the state law, and that means Orono as a college student, I think you should be able to vote. I also feel our turnout in our municipal elections is really low, and I maybe it's, if it doesn't move forward, I hope it doesn't move forward for the reasons you articulated in terms of the culture and the just what makes Orono special, but also 6% of us vote in our municipal elections. That's not not enough. And the November election is many more people vote. A lot of students, a lot of people who are apathetic about what's going on in town, who show up to vote on the top ticket, the national campaigns, they're going to leave if they don't know who we are, they're going to leave those ballots blank. And it's on us as elected representatives to make sure they do know who we are. So as part of my, if we do move it to November, those college students are going to hear from me. And I hope they hear from us as a council more and more, because I think we need stronger relationships between the town of Orono and the college at the University of Maine, and building those relationships that hopefully last a lifetime. So I'm for it. I definitely would like to see us it's ultimately the voters' choice. And I'd like this council, as a councilor, I'd like to put it before the voters and let them decide. Has it ever been voted on to change it do we know? In the 50 years?
Not that I'm aware of. The only thing I would just want to, just because there are some people who might watch that might not know, I just want to be really clear that anybody can vote in an election. The issue that you're talking about is whether election day needs to be the day of the election. Because when you talk about 548 or 84 people who voted in our last special election, and over 200 of them voted by absentee ballot, the absentee balloting period is 30 days. So again, if you move this to run concurrent with a state election, the November election, I've talked to staff. There are positives to that for staff and negatives to that for staff, and they wash. So this is not, I'm not trying to say you should or shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, I want to be crystal clear that we right now are not saying college students can't vote. It's just the date of the election. And then you're going to run into with November, you start backing up for a true period for nominations, which is the time when people can get onto the ballot. And you're talking about doing that in July or August. So I think we need to, perhaps if I know where we're headed and what information you want back from staff. The other thing I need to get a sense of, if we're going to November, what does that mean? Does it mean that people who are currently seated sit for, after this next municipal election? Does it mean that people whose terms would come up in March of 2025 have now just made a commitment to stay until November of 2025? So I want to talk through that with the attorney and people who've gone through the process. But it would be helpful for me to understand, are we targeting a specific date or multiple dates?
Sophie, am I right that the current schedule is we pull papers starting in December, but we turn them in January for the
Yep.
March elections?
Yep.
So if we backed up from the beginning of November, folks would have to turn in nomination papers at the beginning of middle of September, September 15th-ish.
Either August 15th or September 15th. I have not run the.
It's 6 weeks before, isn't it about?
But it's 100 days and then 60 days. And so.
Okay, that would be important for me to see. I would want to know when people had to pull papers and when they had to turn them in. So that data I'll just put out there as data I would like to see.
Yeah.
I just say too that I don't think anybody in Maine does a better job than Orono in getting people registered to vote. In the last cycle, in the 2022 election, we registered 1,160 new voters, or either registration changes or updates. And Shelley Crosby, the team, the volunteers, it is if you believe that elections belong to the people of Orono are doing it right. And that means we have the election on the campus. We work with UMaine Votes to register students for weeks in advance. And I'm really proud of that. So
I think that if it's a wash for how the town actually runs the election, then yeah, the important part is what is best for a new counselor coming in, when's the best time for that. And also like I'm also for as many people voting as possible, because I have a feeling that then you don't end up, it just, the more voices you hear, hopefully the more likely you're going to get somebody that the vast majority of the town would actually like to be sitting here. And I think that that's important because we have an important job to do. So I'm for November, but with caveats. But I also, Leo, understand both some of what you're saying, and also I understand that university kids can vote anytime, like you were saying. They can vote in February. It's their choice, and they should make it important, and they should go do it if they want to be civic minded.
And I would say, if you take a local election and you don't pair it with a federal election, and we're not seeing numbers increase exponentially, we're still probably going to have it here because it allows us to staff.
Yeah.
Do you know? I mean, that's part of the issue is we hold our local elections with lower turnouts here as opposed to campus. And I don't think it's a matter of even just money or the closeness here. It's also whether or not it will fit with the campus schedule. At state and local elections, they shut off a lot of the things that they do athletic wise and other wise. So I think it's
I think it should be the second Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And if the state and the federal government want to follow suit with Orono, follow Orono's lead, I think that'd be so. I'm for matching it up.
So what I'm hearing, and you please tell me if I'm wrong, and I don't want to discount any voice, I really don't. But what I'm hearing is you'd like me to come back with specific information about nomination periods, what it would look like if we were in, I'm hearing November. I can run that easily for however we do it. And answers from the town attorney of the confirmation that this is indeed a minor change.
Yeah.
And also looking for understanding what it would mean when you change people's terms. I think it would be a good idea, whether I reach out to Meredith or you reach out to Brian to let the school know that we're beyond the initial conversation, but going to be having a larger conversation about this.
And I can talk to Brian. You might see him once in a while.
But I think you should officially.
It might come up, but are we hearing that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, and like specifically when we say November, we mean the date of the state and federal election. I think that's
what I got.
And we're thinking that we bring this to the town for their decision this March, right? March 24 for a vote because that's when you have to change it at the municipal election, right?
Yep, which is why I gave you the timeline.
Right.
I mean, unless you thought this was gonna take a ton of education and focus groups and things like that to get to an answer. I have heard from other towns that it is a bit of a mistake to get all of the work done and then sit and wait for a long time before your next election. And so I think as long as you're okay with moving this to probably a public hearing and a decision on December 11th, which would be your council meeting, you can have the public hearing and make the decision on the same day, or we could have a public hearing at the November meeting and make your decision in December. In the past, I have suggested to councils that when there are public hearings on big issues, it looks to people like when you make decisions that same night, even if you're taking all of the information into consideration, that you've already made your decision. And so I am usually an advocate of a public hearing a month before a decision on a big topic, and I would consider a charter change a big topic, even if it's a minor change.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be in November for the public hearing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay.
As long as we're dipping into the charter, what would it take to change the charter to read that the RSU board is responsible for filling a vacancy that would occur?
I don't think you can. I think that's state law. State law is directive on that.
That's not our charter.
State law. Municipal officers are the voice of the people, not the RSU directors.
So when I was appointed halfway through to fill an RSU slot, we looked at that time, and it was because the state law required that the council fill that. That's about it.
So the council acts as the legislative body of the town. It's a very precise legal role. If you think back to town meeting form of government, that is what the council acts as the town meeting for the town. So that is why.
I thought that was charter.
No.
Okay. Never mind.
But you can look at the charter. We just have to be careful, because if you make structural changes, it then kicks it into a charter commission, which is that's a multi-step, more than a year process.
So if it does change, that would also mean school board members would be in that same. So they can't opt out and say, we're going to do our election.
So I have not researched that. My hunch is no. But I will be on the phone with other questions. I can verify that.
And the budget thing still has to happen in June. That's separate.
That's separate. That coincides with the June state election, and if they don't have one, it's just its own election that we bring everybody back for the few people that do that.
Just to confirm, you said that this all sort of rides on the premise that this is a minor change. So we'll sort of await confirmation from the attorney.
Yep.
And if he says it's a major change, then this timeline sort of is out.
This timeline is out. If it was a major change, then you would want to you'd have to seat a charter commission. And I would work really hard to try to figure out how I can meet the needs of council within a minor change, just because it's a long process and it's a lot more arduous.
It's good management right there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other topic? Oh, Sonia.
I just wanted to offer public comments on this topic, if it would be appropriate to.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyone online or in the room have comments about the timing of municipal election and our efforts to potentially put it out for a vote about changing it? Okay. All right. Hearing none.
Thank you. Hearing none. turn it back over to you.
All right. So we are coming up on our third hour of a 2-hour meeting. So I want to be brief with my comments. We have the manager's report, and I asked Sophie for 2 minutes at the start of her manager's report time to share a couple of things. One, there has been a lot of press lately in our region, not in Orono, thankfully, but in our region about the rise in hate and bias incidents. And I was invited to attend a meeting with Attorney General Aaron Frey that was facilitated by Representative Osher this week. It was very informative. And I don't want to speak for anybody, but having had conversations with people in the community who were concerned about this, just wanted to share with them that beyond the scope of Orono, people are at the state level are very aware of this, and they are being particularly inclusive of the small communities that might be affected by hate bias incidents. I was really encouraged by the turnout and by the action on the part of the state. So if people want more information or details on that, I'm happy to speak about it. I don't want to take a ton of time now, but I thought it was an issue that was important enough for several people to speak with me about. It's an important issue, important enough for the state to come to our region to talk about. So that's out there. And it may be something that we choose to talk within the DEIB committee more about, but that was there. And I was really heartened by that. The other thing is I'm sort of reinforcing something that Sophie mentioned when she was talking about the staffing plan and staffing changes. And I just want to emphasize, we have had a staff that has tried to be very, very responsive to our requests always, but in particular lately, very responsive to a lot of requests that we've asked throughout the budget season and post-budget season. Now we are losing staff members. So we should be mindful of that and we don't have to curtail our expectations of what we want to accomplish as a council, but we do have to sort of open ourselves up to the reality that there is no capacity within the town staff to do anything extra because they're really just trying to keep their heads above water, trying to do the things that they have been doing and that they need to be doing. So I'm trying to be mindful of that. I hope we are also mindful of that we're going to ride it out. We're going to come out. We're going to have a great system in place and an awesome staffing plan when the manager, can present the plan to us. But we're entering into a period where the capacity is just not there among people. And so to the extent that I can take some of the burden off of Sophie, please let me know. But there are certainly things that I cannot do that are just going to take more time to do. So that's my quick and dirty version of the things I had to say. So manager's report.
Okay, I wrote it down, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. First, to let you know that our ladder truck, we've tried really hard to get it back, even without the cylinder. We have lobbied the company to put us higher in the process to get the ladder cylinder rebuilt. We are not successful with that. At this point, we're now we are sternly talking with the company about winterizing it, wrapping it, and ensuring that it's not going to get damaged because it cannot be inside. So we're working our way through that. I have talked with council several times about the really large land use violation out on Stillwater Avenue. We have reached a consent agreement. We have opted for stern language and not making it go through the court process. That agreement included requiring that somebody who actually is certified to work in wetlands put in the erosion sediment control new plan, that they are agreeing that the boundary of the wetland inclusion is going to be marked, and we are going to record this at the Registry of Deeds because they will not be able to benefit from any of the wetland that they might dry out to be able to do further development on their parcel. We are requiring somebody with knowledge of working in a wetland to do the restoration plan, which involves replanting of trees. We're waiting for the restoration plan. We've given them the okay to move forward with the erosion sediment control fix. They've had to pay for I'm gonna get the words wrong, but like a NERPA permit through DEP. Not very expensive, but that takes some time to get. And once they do that, they'll have, I think it's 21 days to do their restoration plan. And we took a $5,000 fine in order to the town. So that's just goes into code revenue. Our town attorney billed them. Well, he's gonna bill us, but we're getting reimbursed for about $2,200 worth of legal fees. And I want to say there's a $12,000 fine hanging over their head if they violate moving forward. I was more interested in getting it restored, making the town whole, making them not benefit from an environmental violation like this, and holding something over their head so that they'll comply with codes moving forward. So that has been signed by both of us. It just now needs to go to the registry of deeds, and the lawyer has the money sitting in escrow. Okay. And just to let you know, I did run the language by Jeff for his review before we move forward with it. I've heard back from Mark Leonard. The VZ Town Council has indicated that it is not wanting to move forward with a council-led initiative on fluoridation of the municipal water supply without hearing more from the community. Not in terms of, I want to make sure I'm clear, not in terms of holding more forums for people to speak, but rather to hear that it's an issue for more than just a few people. To let you know, I want to give you a heads up that we have some issues with police are kind of front and center this week. Last week, we have a blown motor in one of the frontline vehicles. We found a motor for $2,900 with 30,000 miles on it. So we have made arrangements to get that back. It is going to be out of commission because we're going to work to put that in at Rob's shop. So it probably will be November before we see that. We have another one, which is the detective's car that new brakes, new rotors, bushings. There's a whole exhaust manifold. We do not have the capability to do the test on the exhaust manifold. And so we need to send that into the shops. It's going to be about $4,000. And while cracks in a windshield would not normally be something we talk to council about, we just get it fixed. It is interesting. It takes 10 days to get a windshield replaced now, but one of the newer cruisers, it's got 8,000 miles on it, has a crack that has shown in the double crack in the windshield. There is no clear evidence of it being hit, which leads us to believe that it could just be a defective window, but it also could be an issue with the way the car was built. So we're taking that in to have some more testing done. Good news, it's under warranty. I already told you about that. An update on the well claim. If you recall, we settled a well claim and then it came back. The insurance company denied coverage for the claim, saying it was an extension of our existing claim that we've already tapped out our coverage for. I gave the settlement document to Roger Huber, who is our local attorney. and asked him to help me understand how it was either not, if it was a new claim that we were liable for, why was it not covered? Like, how is the town responsible for this? He's come back with some guidance around the well test and whether or not there was salt in the well. I've asked him to just reach out directly to the claimant's lawyer because it's a legal question. It is not a factual question and it's not a policy question. So I will have more on that headed up. Want to let you know, council had some questions recently about insurance coverage, why we asked for insurance coverage, what it takes to get insurance coverage. I reached out to Marcus Ballou, who I have worked with in my previous life at Maine Municipal Association, and made arrangements for him to come talk to council on October 2nd. So for people who have questions about what's going on with that, I punted it to the source and he will come up and talk to you. Tax bills are, in fact, well, either today or tomorrow, they'll be in the mail. Want to remind people that under state law, we're not required to send a tax bill. If you bought your property recently, it might have gone to the past owner because it is based on who owned the property on April 1st. If you don't have your tax bill, if somebody hasn't seen a tax bill recently, you know, like this by the end of this week or so, want to send them in, we have that information. We were hoping, one of the things that we elected to add on to Trio when we did the upgrade, we were hoping to have the module that would allow people to sign into the website and be able to create an account where they would be able to see what they owed on their property tax bill and make a payment through Inform-E if they wanted to. Unfortunately, we're running into some glitches with Trio and the conversion that we've gone through. Some of them are details, finance details around general ledgers pulling in from the last year and tax reports missing cash receipt. We have it, but the report doesn't show it. So I have pushed that back and asked for them to fix the more critical to operation and accountability questions that we have with them at this point. So it is coming, but you probably won't see it till February, that ability to sign in, see what you owe. Okay. The Observer is going out. There are 4 additional pages that I worked with communications on, including information around the potlucks, the message that went in the tax bills, information about the community policing director, a message from the community policing director, and a list of what I think is in the hopper based on my conversations with Jeff. We had to explain what the hopper was, but he now knows. Sander. Anyway. So there's kind of the list of the big items that I think are in front of council in the next quarter. So there's that. And the last item, I think this is more for people who might watch this. I'm getting inquiries from residents want to talk to the planning board like it's a planning committee and not necessarily understanding that the planning board is a separate legal body that the council appoints people to, and their job is to take the ordinances that council has adopted and apply development and permit applications to the ordinances to make sure that we comply. And we can throw some best practice in there. You have a planning board chair who is extraordinary. He's been doing it for a long time, Phil Rock, and he has a way of being able to hear citizen concerns at a public hearing and ask developers to do things that they don't have to do and get them to agree to try to meet community needs. I think there's an impression in the community that the planning board's not, by some in the community, that the planning board's not doing their job because there's no public input. The issue that we have is that there isn't a ton of opportunity in the planning board phase to deal with things that haven't already been addressed in ordinance. So the idea is if you are asking for a project that's allowed in that zoning district and you meet the performance standards, you can do it. And if it's a question of, do those performance standards, are they adequate to address the impact on community members? That becomes a town council policy, not to apply it to a specific planning board project. You can't change the rules on developers, and they have a right on their property to do the things that are allowed land uses on that. The other thing that we've done from a staff perspective, when I first got here, developers really were frustrated with the town's process to go to planning board because it could be multiple nights to be in front of the planning board. And it costs a lot of money to do that. So instead, we really took Kyle, our planner, and helped with economic development by working with developers and property owners to understand what the performance standards were. Staff doesn't speak for the planning board, but staff works really hard with developers to put projects in front of the planning board that meet the site plan or the performance standards that are required. So when citizens they have concerns about noise, as long as they meet the noise ordinance, I'm sorry, but that person has a right to use their property in a way that meets the ordinance. So I am just a little concerned that we might be setting up at times when we want to encourage people's concerns and comments to come forward. I want to make sure we're sending them to the right place, because if the concern is that we're not dealing with brownfields, then that's the town. If the town council wants to do something more than DEP requires, that's for you to decide. The planning board can't make a finding on performance standards that ties to something more stringent than state law if council hasn't created the ordinance that requires it. I just want to be kind of helpful, and I get concerned when we create expectations in the community and community members then don't feel heard when it really is, we're sending them to the wrong place.
So you're saying those people who are going to the planning board should be coming to council?
I'm saying that if people in the planning board, if people in the community want to change the policy of what's allowed proactively, then they should come to council to do that. If people want to affect a change on a development that goes beyond state law or the town ordinance, which the planning board is charged with enforcing, it's really hard to do that. And it becomes more of a negotiation with the planning board trying to facilitate that. I saw that down at the Kia when we changed over from the state police barracks to the Kia outsource financial building with some cars on the lot. That was an allowed use, and the planning board went through its process, and we had one neighbor that really wanted a fence up, even though they technically met the setback. And we had other people concerned about cars turning around on Page Place. There were no statutory things that required signage to go up saying dead end street or a fence to go up. But people came to the planning board with, I realize this might not be an allowed thing, but I'm really concerned about this. And the planning board members kind of worked and facilitated a conversation, and Kia put up a fence and paid to have dead end road signs put up at the end of Page Place. So there's a way, if there are concerns, that you can kind of bring that forward. But coming to council because there's a development that is underway is not, council can't be involved in that at that point.
We could put a moratorium in, right? If we wanted to.
You'd have a really hard time putting a moratorium if they've already got the application pending, unless you had talked about the moratorium prior to the application going in. So that is when it's really important for council and the community to be talking about what are the things that proactively they're not happy about. And so council could then have a conversation about, for example, in the downtown growth area, what are the foot candles of light that we are willing to have, or how many curb cuts are we willing to have, or what's the setback, or you know what I mean? Yeah. But they have to be proactive. Yeah. And because the town's position, once there's an application pending, we of course owe the community a voice because that's our job. But on the other hand, we also have to ensure that we don't violate, maybe not, the rights of the people bringing the application.
It's tough because I would ask, like, show of hands. I know we can't vote on these things, and I know it's late, but like the solar project, how many of us knew about that before the planning board? I didn't know about it, and I didn't know about it because until I went to the video, because there were concerns from folks off college, but the natural gas thing. So I went to watch the meeting afterwards. So it's just, I think we do need to have a conversation about how we make people aware of what's going on in their neighborhoods. I know we mail people that live within 500 feet, and those are property owners. They aren't all residents because they maybe, you know what I mean?
So I would say it says 500 in the ordinance. Yeah. We go significantly farther than that. Yeah. When we do it, we pull a much wider berth. I would also just ask to think about the fact that if you're interested in the planning board, you can go onto the website and you can click 2 buttons and you can get a planning board agenda sent to you every time it gets posted.
Yeah, I get a text.
And I don't have a problem communicating, and I talked with our communications person about when the planning board stuff goes out on social media, can we not just say, here's the agenda, but give a little recap of what's coming? Yeah. But I do think there's a balance, especially within the staffing level and the budget level that you guys have articulated you want, that every time it's just one more step to educate people, and we're not taking any other steps off the plate. I've already maxed. I had a Monday meeting with my communications person, and I've maxed him out for the week. And so I wish that part of what we could focus on is how do we get people to use the resources that we already have for them to be connected.
Yeah. They're simply not relevant enough. And that's the problem we're going to have to discuss as we modernize and improve. And it's nobody's fault, and then it's no one's, but people just tune it out because it's not relevant enough to them. It's outdated, it's too passive. And Facebook, and it's on the website, it's not a communication plan. And I know we're not resourced to be in everybody's business all the time. We've got businesses anywhere near where they live. But that's the challenge we run into as we're talking to people, and what you run into as you're trying to,
So I am, before you ever even decided to run for council, we started this conversation, right?
I appreciate that.
And I truly believe that local government is about facilitating a process between the formal things that we do and the community. I 100% believe that. where I run into issue is when, if we want to change the process, then we should have a very clear understanding about what that system is going to be, who's going to do it, how we're going to resource it. Because when it turns into bullets flying at the town from every level on things that I'm not resourced for that.
Yeah.
And if I was, I would want to do it. But I will say I have one person that we added a whopping
8 hours? Oh,
8
or something.
No, he
yeah.
was 24.
Yeah.
We added 16 hours of time to. And I'm also trying to transition my executive assistant, because I'm not going to get another one that does graphics the way she's done it. That's unusual and quite frankly not something I would hire for right now. All of the annual report stuff that has been done, so I think if we want to change, I think I would be all over a conversation about how to change. I think it can't be we just add more. I think we need to change, and I'm all for direction from the council, but given the resources we have, the website, our Instagram, our Facebook are the ways that we have our email notification. Those are the things that we have.
Yeah.
Our notices sent for people within, you say 500 feet for like anything the planning board is doing, or
if it hits site plan review, subdivision, which are the two major things that would hit the planning board. If it has to have a public hearing, we pull much more than that. But when I also send somebody a letter saying, this is what it is, and here's how you can find all of the details if you want them, and there's a public hearing on this date to share, and 2 weeks after the public hearing calls up the town planner yelling, and then admits, oh yeah, I did see that. I didn't really pay attention to it. So I've delivered it to you, made it interesting enough for you to open, and then you throw it in the trash. I'm not saying that that's a bad person. I'm just saying I'm out of creative solutions for how to get people there. And when I think about the priorities that we have that are critical to everybody, like I'd love to be able to get my senior staff on some sustainability work for budgeting that I need to get in place before we get to January. But I've only got so much room. And what you're going to hear from me is that a couple of the senior staffers are way overwhelmed. And so I'm happy to have the conversation, but I wish we could talk about what are we going to do different, not we need to do more. It feels like we need to do more. And it also feels like when it's a scatter approach and people trying to do it, it oftentimes can send the wrong message to the community, and it can cause even more work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So how can we all get on the same page, number one, and number two, if there are different things out there we should be doing, I'm all for hearing it.
Yeah, I think a bigger conversation about some of our processes and looking to like what is the modern context in which we tend to communicate as a society would be a really fruitful thing, because like hear you loud and clear that the solution can't be add more stuff, please. That's not realistic and isn't going to solve the fundamental problem of kind of a mismatch in communication in the modern age.
I guess I also just, you kind of flat out said it's antiquated. It's not enough, or it's not working. I mean, sending a letter to someone's home and then someone coming 2 weeks later, that to me seems, I don't know what else. I mean, knock on the door and say, hey, by the way, that's a little, I feel like to say we're not doing enough maybe is not all that accurate. I think it's significant what we're doing. Always, if we can do it better within the scope of what we have available, that's great. But I mean, gosh, sending a letter is about as direct as you can get, other than I don't think it's realistic that we make phone calls to people, because people won't pick the phones up and all of that. And so, I mean, I feel like that's pretty significant. Let's really talk about this for another 20 minutes or so.
Let's do that. I just wanted to say thank you though, because I found like that description is helpful. And I do think it would be helpful to me as a counselor, and my guess is helpful to other folks in the public too, to get increasing clarity like you just gave around what I have seen in the public is I think folks don't really understand what the planning board's like mandate is and what things come back to council, like exactly what you were laying out. And I think if people do have structural concerns or process concerns, those are really policy issues that come back to council. And I think just making that clear, and then council needs to have a discussion about the policy of how we run that back and forth between planning board and council and what parts of that we can change. And I'm guessing some parts we can't because they probably have to do with state laws. And that discussion is a council discussion, and it's important that we have it so that it isn't flack that the planning board's getting, which isn't fair to them. And Phil Rock is amazing, by the way. And I don't personally know other people in the planning board, but I'm betting they're equally amazing. And yeah, and I think that's important to acknowledge that we take up what's really our responsibility and be sure if the community is having concerns that those come to us. So I appreciate that. Yeah. I did want to say one teeny little thing, which was along with the September 1st deadline to get stuff to Sophie about what to do with unassigned funds potentially. And what to get to Megan about tables for the fair. September 1st is also when I need anything you have to say about the policy and procedures manual. So it's all September 1st. There you go. Great. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more opportunity for public comment if there is anybody online, Val. Yes.
Come right ahead.
Oh, thank you.
So I was wondering what the current schedule is for residential property assessment. They happen.
So, we just did a reval and we just committed taxes based on the values on April 1st. If you have a concern about your property value, you'd reach out to the assessor and he would do a, he would offer you the opportunity to come inspect your home. So, yeah, have I answered your question?
I guess it's more along the lines of like, how many years in between assessments like do they happen for residential properties?
So there are a couple of schools of thought with that. One is every 10 years. And I will say most communities are moving away from that because there's enough technology now that if you have good records of what is in the property, so your data points are good, you can do market adjustments around classes of properties. So instead of spending $250,000 to $500,000 on a residential reval, people are taking more advantage of the technology to try to keep it current as we go. And the feedback we've gotten, because we waited 30 years,
Right.
And the feedback that we've gotten is that people would much prefer to adjust with the, I think we'll always stay a little bit behind the market because I don't think the goal is ever to have to adjust that.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And you sat for the whole meeting.
I did.
That's pretty amazing.
So Sophie, currently our plan is to adjust as we go as a town and not wait 30 is what you're saying. Thank you.
All right, if there is nothing else, can we adjourn?
Thanks.
Thank you. At 8:15.